Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto betrayed and banished by Tsunade part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. The darkness seemed to loom over Naruto as he gazed wide-eyed in shock upon the members of the esteemed council. Their words rang hollow in his ears as his breath left his lungs in dread. "What did you just say?" Naruto whispered, not willing to believe the command they had just given. "You are banished, Naruto," Tsunade muttered somberly. While she seemed sad from the entire ordeal, the betrayal stung fiercely. "By the will of the council, and by vote, you are to leave the village in 2 days or you will be forced to leave." "Just 2 days," Naruto muttered, his eyes sinking to the floor, an empty feeling falling over him. Betrayed. By the very people he had strived to protect and win their favor. For nothing. "I am sorry, Naruto," Tsunade muttered as she ignored the wary looks the council members gave Naruto, no doubt standing ready to suppress an eventual possession by the Kyuubi. "But considering the state in which you brought the Uchiha back in, as well as your recount of the events that went down, the council have raised worry over the status of your seal. The council does no longer want to be held accountable for whatever may happen should something happen with you or the seal." "But Jiraiya have better things to do than to babysit you," Danzo muttered, ignoring the harsh glare sent by Tsunade. "Hokage, please, we have more things to discuss." "I am sorry, Naruto," Tsunade whispered with teary eyes. "I'll talk to you later, alright? You should prepare and make your farewells with your friends." It had only been a day since he brought Sasuke back from his attempt to join Orochimaru. He should have known that his efforts would prove futile, considering their blind hatred for the fox. After the grave news of his banishment, he had limped home still wounded from the retrieval mission. They wouldn't even give him time to heal. He was 12 years old. They wouldn't even let him heal before throwing him out into the woods. It scared him. He would lose his home, never to return. The very thought had never befallen him before. It was unthinkable that such a thing should ever happen. But it did. And everything he had worked so hard for would be lost with it. Just because he'd used the Kyuubi's chakra in order to survive, after Sasuke had pierced his lung. That his teacher Kakashi had taught him, while leaving Naruto to fend for himself before the Chunin exams. Naruto shook his head as he felt anger flare up. It wasn't fair. He had done his mission, completed it, and been treated like shit for it. Even Sakura hadn't even come to see him once after he'd brought back Sasuke. He didn't know what he expected, really. How stupid he had been. Arriving at his apartment, he let himself inside and stood for a moment in the utter silence that seemed too much louder than it ever had before. The truth was nobody had come to see him. Naruto let himself sink to the floor as desperation took him. He cried. The last time he had cried like this was when Haku died. It seemed so long ago now, like a different life. Like everything that happened then happened to someone other than himself. He had never felt so broken like this. He hated himself. And for the first time, he hated the village. In wild anger, Naruto screamed in desperate sorrow before picking up the closest object he had and threw it into the wall. Rampaging through his apartment, and cursing the village and everyone in it alike, Naruto didn't care that he broke everything he owned. It wasn't like he needed any of it anymore anyway. He hated them all for this. He hated them all for using him and throwing him away. He hated them all for making him crawl and bleed for their approval which they never gave. As Naruto calmed down, he gathered his thoughts and drew a shuddering breath. The truth was, he had nothing here. Nothing and nobody. He had thought Tsunade cared, but that wasn't obviously much. Jiraiya was not here either, so he figured Jiraiya did not care much either. And his team, well, the length of their affection had been shown clearly, since he'd been home for over a day, wounded without anyone coming to see him. The only thing he had in Konoha was his dream. But dreams, Naruto realized dreams were for children. Not monsters like himself. Crying silently, Naruto began to pack everything he thought he would need to give himself a fighting chance. He would leave. Tonight. He wouldn't give anyone the courtesy of giving their false farewells. He would go and find some sort of serenity elsewhere. It did not take him long to finish packing. Eventually he stood before his door, with his backpack filled and ready to go. Reaching for the handle of the door, Naruto hesitated. This was it. He was actually doing it. A part of him felt like a scumbag, leaving in such a manner like Sasuke had, but it was not the same at all. They were throwing him out, against his will. His face took on an angry snarl as he reached up to his forehead in order to pull off his headband, his tears having long since dried up. Looking at the headband, Naruto felt his anger lessen upon the memories it invoked in him. A somber smile fell upon his lips before shaking his head. Another life, maybe? Letting it go, the headband fell to the floor with a heavy thud. Giving it a last glance, Naruto opened the door and disappeared into the night. It wasn't until his last day that anyone in the village noticed his disappearance. "Hey Naruto!" a voice called out. Heaving with heavy breath under the amount of weight he carried upon his shoulders, Naruto gave the young man that came running an annoyed glance. "Ryu." Naruto greeted his friend, before heaving the logs that were easily 5 times his own size onto the makeshift sled that stood before him at the outskirts of the small village of Kizara. Leaning back to stretch his back, Naruto ignored the incredulous looks from the other workers around him. It still made him uncomfortable, despite having been living in the village for the last 5 years. He had traveled for 2 years, after his departure from the village, seen places and talked to interesting people before finally deciding to settle when he came upon the small province which held the Kizara village. It had been some very good years he'd lived there. Peaceful, and without the hate-filled glares and stares that he could still remember from Konoha. When he was younger he'd always pitted the civilians, naive as he was, as he believed that everything that was worth doing in life had been as a shinobi. But during the last 5 years he'd known peace. For once, as far as he could remember, he had serenity. Here he was just Naruto, an orphan of war who did not know his family name. He'd yet not told anyone of what he carried, as it would no doubt change people's views of him. Chances were he'd been chased out of yet another home. He was 19 years old now. He'd changed a lot as well. Before, back in Konoha, he'd been a squirt, even among those of his own age. Now, he towered over most he came across, being a good head taller than everyone else in the village. He was quite happy with how he turned out, and the physical work the village demanded every day had done him good for the last few years. The first time he'd overheard the local girls call him handsome had been quite refreshing. He supposed the amount he worked out physically helped their attraction, but he was not complaining. Naruto had never stopped training, despite having no intentions of ever going back to becoming a shinobi. He'd quickly realized the uses of enhancing his muscles with chakra when it came to physical labor, and so had continued practicing his chakra control. He liked to think he'd improved quite a lot, but it was not like he had anyone to compare against. While they were in the land of Earth, Naruto had kept far away from any shinobi villages and shinobi themselves, as far as he could manage. As a civilian, he'd found work easily enough. He was young and strong, something anyone would see if they saw him, being both broader and taller than any of his peers. As a budding and growing village, there were always a need for things to be built, repaired, and grown. Looking strong as ever, Ruto! Ryu grinned boyishly as he came up to Naruto. Ryu had come to the village a year after Naruto had decided to settle, orphaned from war abroad, something Naruto had refrained from questioning much about. Young and inexperienced, Naruto had taken it upon himself to help Ryu settle as well, and they had both hit off quite well in the months after. Ryu was nowhere near as tall or as big in mass as Naruto was, and despite their shared age, still looked quite boyish. He had light brown, short and messy-looking hair with dark eyes and an angular face which held no small amount of tan from working in the sun, as most of the villagers had. He wore cheap linen clothing, light brown in color, as did Naruto and most of the village, as they lived in general poverty. "I told you not to call me that." Naruto grinned with playful irritation before putting Ryu in a headlock. After a moment of roughhousing, Naruto let him go as they shared a laugh. "So, what do you want?" "I'm working." "It's midday, man." Ryu lifted a brow at Naruto. Frowning, Naruto looked to the sky and noticed the position of the sun. "So it is," Naruto muttered. He hadn't even noticed the time until now. Work was over. "Times are a bit rough right now, but do you want to grab something to eat?" "Sure." Naruto shrugged. "Let me just give a word to the manager, and I'm coming." The day's payment was given without a hitch, and the boys trudged down the street of the crowded village, making small talk as they looked for a suitable place to eat. Kizara village laid in the bottom of a wide and lush valley. It was the land of Earth after all, so the country was framed beautifully with tall mountains and many rivers that ran down into the many lakes of the valley. Clean water was rarely an issue for them, and the wildlife was rich. The village easily stretched a couple of kilometers, but it was still a very rural village with only simple walls protecting it from minor undesirables. They did not have the same technology as Naruto could remember from Konoha, but he was fine with that. Everything was made with simple wood and stone, and the lack of electricity was sometimes missed if Naruto was being honest with himself, but it was also quite freeing to be independent of unneeded luxuries. Times were hard for the village. As war was waged beyond their borders, it had quite an impact on the trade that came. Without much technology to speak of, Their lives were very dependent on trade as more and more refugees came to the village looking for respite from the horrors outside the valley. Arriving at one of the local food halls, Ryu and Naruto found a table at the back of the room, away from any rowdy villagers celebrating the end of work for the day. The waitress that came up to them was a cute young woman that smiled brightly at them both when they noticed her. She was a long-haired brunette, their own age and of a slender build, as she wore an apron over her simple brown linen clothing. "Hello, boys." She smiled infectiously as they both grinned back. "Hello, Hina." Naruto nodded politely. Naruto ignored Ryu, whom seemed to be blushing as he looked at her. "So what will it be today?" Hina smiled, looking inquisitively at Ryu, who was beginning to make a fool of himself. Discreetly stomping Ryu's foot under the table, Naruto made Ryu stammer an order for them both, which made Hina giggle. "She's so beautiful," Ryu muttered dreamily as Hina went away to the kitchens at the back to get their order, pushing through the boisterous crowd of the hall. "Yeah, I've noticed she has that effect on you," Naruto snorted, ignoring Ryu's embarrassed flush. "For that matter, she's going to know as well if you continue to bumble as you are." "Ugh, not like it will matter in the end anyway." Ryu shook his head demurely. "I'm an orphan. I have nothing to offer her family for her hand in marriage anyways. Pretty sure they never even give me a second-hand consideration." "Then work harder," Naruto muttered, eyes gazing over the increasing amount of patrons that filled the hall. "Talk with her at least and see where it will go. Work hard so you actually have something to impress her family with." At this point, Hina came back with their order and smiled brightly at them as they thanked her and paid for the food before she went off again. "So, have you heard any of the rumors from the Land of Water?" Ryu questioned, obviously not willing to talk about his apparent love interest. "Haven't really heard anything during the last month." Naruto shrugged. "Well, there's a big rebellion going on over there, yeah?" Ryu began, and Naruto nodded, already knowing this. "Something big went down, like people are talking about a giant demon appearing or something like that." Naruto's shock was easily hidden as he kept eating. Another one of the sealed beasts, maybe? It wouldn't surprise him if either side of the war had gotten their hands on a Jinchuriki. Hiding his surprise, Naruto lifted a brow with a smirk at Ryu. "Demon?" Naruto muttered in what he hoped sounded like unbelieving amusement. "Well, I dunno, you think something like that exists?" Snorting, Naruto kept eating with a thoughtful gaze into his bowl. "I think there are forces we do not understand in this world but demons, as we picture them from the many, many stories we are told. No. I somehow doubt it's as easy as that." "What about these bloodline users?" A memory, unwanted and unbidden, sprang into the forefront of his mind, and Naruto had to resist the urge to clench his hands in anger. "What about them?" "I heard they're really evil and dangerous, but aren't they just people with abilities?" "You shouldn't believe everything you hear, Ryu." Naruto fixed Ryu with a disapproving stare. "I know that, but I've never met one before." Ryu shrugged thoughtfully. "Have you?" "Not that I know of." Naruto lied easily. "And that's exactly my point." Ryu eagerly, leaning forth in his seat, as if explaining something secret. "Just imagine walking past someone with a special bloodline, with special powers. Like, being able to shoot fire or something." Naruto kind of wanted to say that it does not take one a bloodline to be able to shoot fire, but it was honestly irrelevant. Most civilians away from shinobi villages never saw anything more interesting than the usual samurai, so Ryu's imagination was very justified. "They're just people like you and me, Ryu. Both good and bad and everything in between. You take the fun out of everything, you know," Ryu muttered, ignoring Naruto's snort as they ate. "I wonder if things had been different if I had one." "A bloodline, you mean?" Naruto lifted his brow and Ryu nodded. "Wouldn't you like to be able to do things like they do? It sounds so incredible." Ryu's naivety was somewhat amusing, but a somber mood fell over Naruto as he thought about it. "From what I heard, in the Land of Water, before the rebellion began, I heard the Mizukage of the shinobi village declared all those with a bloodline to be slaughtered. In his eyes, they were less than beasts, too dangerous to be let alive." Naruto shook his head. "I heard it tore families apart, neighbors murdering each other in prejudice, fear and self-defense. So no, I think I'm fine with how I turn out." Ryu looked completely bummed out, but it was Naruto's honest opinion. Hopefully he'd respect that. Eating on in silence, it was not long after their discussion that the doors to the food hall was slammed open. Silence fell upon the room like a gunshot as everyone turned towards those that had caused the ruckus. As a federal law, only samurai in the employ of political leaders was allowed to bear swords. Therefore, The 5 men that had barged into the food hall were easily identified as such. They were clothed in traditional kimono, swords at their sides as their ragged faces gazed sneeringly over the crowd. The patrons quickly evaded eye contact and dully paid attentions to their drinks and hushed whispers with each other. Discreetly keeping an eye on them, Naruto followed them with his eyes as they went over to an occupied table before harshly pulling and kicking those that were using it away. Ryu kept his gaze down into his food, but Naruto was not really afraid of them. It was not an unexpected sight to see. It was quite often you could see the samurai beating up the defenseless for minor offenses and imagined slights. The abuse of power was common, and Naruto had even seen a man get beat up for breathing too loud. There were worse crimes the samurai had taken as well. While it did not happen often, there were times Naruto had heard the samurai taking liberties with the local women against their will as well as murder. They went unpunished for everything as well. In another life, Naruto would have stepped in and helped those in need, but he was no longer that person. He was just a civilian now. He would abide by the law like everyone else. He had considered helping many times, but ultimately thought the better of it. Fighting against those in power would bring nothing but trouble. Sighing, Naruto felt his old dreams of protecting his loved ones rear its ugly head at him, but he quickly shoved those thoughts to the dark pits of his mind where they belong. One would wake up as soon as the sun rose in Kizara village. Daylight burning, it was usually a rush during the summer season before autumn as their survival would depend on the fruits of their labor. While winter did not grow as cold and devastating as in the land of snow, it was still enough to make life considerably harder. Pull! A man yelled as several lines of men pulled the ropes connected to the foundation of a wall. Sweating, Naruto heaved as hard as he could along with those that surrounded him as they finally managed to raise the foundation to its standing position. Cheers rung out from the crowd upon completion, and some set out to make sure it stood secure. Naruto! The manager yelled, and Naruto turned towards the sound as he was waved over. Hey, old man! Naruto grinned, sweat running down his form under the baking sun. What's up? Cheeky brat. The manager grinned widely, before giving Naruto a small pouch. You're doing good work for me, pulling so much more weight than anyone else here. Take a break and see if there's any iron wires at the market that you can buy for me, yeah? Alright, but I'm good to continue working though. I don't mind. I know, but the last shipment has been late, and we really need it soon. Check with the blacksmith as well if you have to, and I trust you to bring any excess coin that is left back to me. Got it. Naruto grinned and set out into town. However, as soon as he arrived at the market, a town crier suddenly yelled at the middle of the market. Waving to get the attention of as many people as possible, Naruto trudged over to see what it was about along with everyone else. Hey Naruto! Ryu called out as he came up to Naruto. Ryu. Naruto nodded before gesturing towards the town crier. Any idea what this is about? No idea, to be honest. Ryu frowned. But I doubt it's anything good. Naruto silently agreed with that. Any news that was delivered by the town crier was usually ordered by the village leader. The village leader treated himself like nobility, something he easily got away with as he was guarded by the only ones allowed to bear arms in the village, whom he paid a generous amount of money to stay in his employ. Usually, the town crier only informed the masses of any eventual raises in taxes or other concessions the village leader forced upon the villagers. By order of Noble Nobu Fujita, in order to properly ward our precious village from the warring world outside our borders, all taxes are as of this moment raised by an amount no less than 5%. The crowd exclaimed in outrage, and the rest of the crier's words was drowned in angry yelling. Yet another tax raise? Ryu groaned. I'm barely eating as it is already. Guess in order for our noble Nobu to eat in his fancy villa, we have to go hungry. Naruto snorted and shook his head. Nobu, the leader, and his wife and son lived in a big compound at the center of the village. Nobu himself was rarely seen, but his retainers had their fingers everywhere in the village. His son was also known throughout the village as an arrogant loudmouth, and unfortunately a dangerous one as well. As the son of the leader, he was allowed to bear arms himself, posing as a samurai yet fooling none. In any case, this would only end in tears. Naruto could already see that they wouldn't be able to finish the new buildings at this rate, which would leave some of the refugees out in the cold or at someone else's mercy when autumn and eventually winter would come. The day went on in a somber mood as Naruto and his colleagues did their best to keep their hopes up. Naruto, at the very least, had a home, a small shack, but it was way too small for more people to live in. Lives laid on the line depending on the result of the construction. Naruto and Ryu eventually found themselves back at the food hall to spend whatever few coins they had for a light snack. And Ryu wanted an excuse to see Hina, but they didn't talk about that. "How's the shop?" Naruto asked as he absent-mindedly gazed over the crowd. "After today, not sure," Ryu muttered, his eyes lingering on Hina as she walked among the many patrons. The same samurai from the day before suddenly entered, but Naruto and Ryu paid them no mind. There were considerably less people present, most likely due to the unfair tax raise, and so the 5 samurai found themselves an empty table easily enough without taking it from someone else. Conversations were held by low and somber voices, and Naruto and Ryu didn't really feel like talking much. "Please don't!" Hina suddenly cried out, and the hall fell silent. "Don't be shy, darling." One of the samurai sneered, and his companions chuckled as he held a tight grip on Hina's wrist. "My father owns this village. I can show you a real good time, you know." The son of the village leader. Naruto didn't even need to think to realize this was bad news, even more so for poor little Hina if this scumbag had his eyes on her. Naruto cast a quick glance at Ryu to see him clenching his hands in anger as the creep pawned at Hina. "Don't," Naruto whispered and shook his head, but it went unnoticed by Ryu, whose gaze was fixed at what transpired. He could see that Ryu wanted to intervene, but no good would ever come of it. Eventually, the son of Nobu got a little too frisky, and Hina in her panic scratched his face in order to free herself. Everyone gasped as the son and the rest of the samurai stood furiously. "You bitch!" he yelled in impotent rage. "Come here!" People yelled in fright and moved to get out of the way as the samurai ran and grabbed the poor girl. Ryu had long since jumped to his feet, and Naruto could see this ending in no good way at all. Maybe it was egotistical of him, but Naruto rose and turned to leave. He didn't want to see this. He'd warned Ryu about meddling, and whatever he did now was his own choice. "Please, no!" Hina screamed as the men pushed her down onto a table and stretched out one of her arms as her father sobbed helplessly in the background. "I will cut off your fucking hand, bitch!" The son snarled and pulled out his sword. People yelled in dismay as the son approached and raised his sword, spurring Naruto to quicken his steps to leave sooner. "No!" Ryu suddenly yelled. Naruto turned around just in time to see Ryu charging into the sun. The son, obviously knowing a little on how to use the sword, easily freed himself and quickly slashed a shallow cut across Ryu's chest. Ryu yelled in pain before one of the samurai fell him over and sat down with his knee on Ryu's chest in order to hold him down. "Hold him still!" The son yelled furiously as he turned back to Hina, whom was looking desperately at Ryu. "You'll take care of him after I'm done with this bitch." Naruto closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Should he just go? 5 long years he had lived in this village without a single incident. It was his home now. And while it was far from perfect, he loved his current life. One action was all it would take for him to lose it all. Opening his eyes, he saw the son raise his sword arm above Hina as she pleaded desperately. He made a decision. As the sun rose the sword above his head, Naruto was already there and grasped onto his wrist and halted his downward slash. Not giving anyone time to respond, Naruto grasped onto his face from behind and drove a knee straight into his spine. Quick as lightning, Naruto sidestepped and wrung his wrist that still held onto the sword. The movement sent the sun flipping over his own hand before landing on his back with a bang, his head hitting the ground hard. Disarming the downed sun, Naruto spun to his feet and used the newly acquired katana to deflect an incoming slash from the closest samurai. Stepping closer to the samurai, Naruto enhanced his legs with chakra and stomped down on his foot. The samurai yelled in pain, but was halted as Naruto hit his fist up into his chin. The force would have sent him flying, but being lodged to the ground by Naruto's foot on his own, he instead went flat out on his back, the back of his head slamming into the wooden floor. The other samurai was already in motion, and Hina had scurried off and away from the battle. Sidestepping a thrust, Naruto yet again grabbed onto a samurai's wrist and spun low to the side, barely ducking under a slash from the man's comrade. Quickly, Naruto slashed deep into the man's leg, sending him screaming to the ground as his leg was now useless. Naruto spun back to the man he still held the wrist of and pierced his shoulder with the sword straight through before shoving the man and the sword away, effectively sticking the samurai like an ornament upon the wall. Ignoring their pained screams, Naruto turned a calculative scowl upon the last samurai, whom quickly turned tail and fled, most likely attempting to tell his master of what had happened. Naruto took a shuddering breath. It had been a long time since he'd moved like that. While it wasn't entirely unwelcome to stretch his legs, so to speak, the blood that followed was indeed regrettable. Looking around himself, Naruto noticed everyone present staring at him completely dumbfounded. Some looked frightened of him, and it brought a whole set of unpleasant memories to the surface. Briskly and without saying a word, Naruto left the food hall and hurried home. He had no illusions about staying. The guard that had run off would no doubt be bringing back up along with a very furious and very powerful noble. It was time to disappear. In the middle of his frantic packing, Naruto froze as he heard knocking on the door. He considering bolting through the window of his little shack, but a voice called out. Naruto! Let me in, I know you're there! Ryu's voice called out. Naruto sighed and opened the door. Letting Ryu inside, Naruto held his eyes low and continued packing. Whatever questions you may have need to be quick. I need to leave before the Nobu's men come to find me. What the hell was that back in the food hall, huh? Ryu exclaimed. You were so fast and so strong. How long have you been able to do things like that? It doesn't matter. Naruto muttered, just about ready to finish packing as he cloaked himself with a hood over the rest of the simple linen cloth he wore. I shouldn't have done it. I cannot live here anymore. I'm sorry you did it for me. Ryu muttered sadly, but Naruto shook his head as he headed for the door. Don't be. Naruto smiled sadly at his friend. Lay low for a while, alright? Nobu's son will most likely forget about your face soon enough, but I'm pretty sure I do not have that option. I have so many questions for you, Ryu shook his head demurely. If we ever meet again, maybe you'll answer some, but it is irrelevant for now. In a brisk pace, Naruto exited his little shack, Ryu following sedately after. The sound of yelling and smell of smoke filled their senses as they came outside. The hell, Ryu muttered in confusion before he noticed smoke rising from a familiar location in the village. The food hall Hina. Ryu dashed towards the food hall and Naruto watched him go with a sad smile, before turning the opposite direction in order to leave, most likely to never return. Naruto walked alone a short distance before stopping. His stomach churned with a bad feeling. Damn it. The local food hall burned brightly in front of the crowd, yet none dared to intervene. In the middle of the town square, in front of the burning food hall, a crowd stood gathered around a couple of individuals. The townsfolk didn't look at them. They all had their eyes low, as the leader's samurai paced amongst them slowly with their sword drawn. Sitting on the edge of the fountain in the middle, a burly-looking individual with beard relaxed, his sword resting beside him in its sheath. He wore red, traditional cloth, trimmed with gold and intricate patterns depicting dragons of old. He held an apple in his hand which he cut pieces off with a tanto blade, eating slowly as his eyes slowly ran over the population present. The man's son stood beside him, an ugly sneer present on his face as he too gazed over the population with contempt. A samurai came up to the man and bowed deeply. Lord Nobu. The samurai bowed deeper. The man that was described is not here. Sighing, Nobu nodded and rose to his feet, glaring condescendingly over the crowd. Where, Nobu drawled slowly as the hall burned eerily behind him. Is the man who defies my rule? The crowd stayed silent and unmoving, none daring to raise eyes nor words. Nobu pursed his lips with annoyance, but his son shared none of his patience. You fucking pricks! His son snarled, walking over to an old man before kicking him down ruthlessly. Where is he, huh? Some of you know where he is. Patience, Toshiro. Nobu voiced calmly despite his son's temper. As his son returned to his side, Nobu waved some of his men over in a lazy manner. Two of his samurai walked in from the side, dragging Hina, the waitress of the food hall, crying into the middle where the men held her down on her knees. A man in the crowd, her father, yelled in protest, but was held back by one of the samurai when he tried to step forward. Where is he? Nobu asked again just as patiently, yet condescendingly. If I have to ask again, I will cut pieces off this girl until someone responds or until she dies. Taking a last slice of his apple, Nobu ate it quickly before rising to his feet. Where is the man who harmed my son and my men? The crowd stayed just as silent, so with pursed lips, Nobu waved at his men holding Hina down to continue their actions. Hina screamed in protest as one of the men forced her to hold out a finger, the other unsheathing his sword. Wait! Someone in the crowd yelled. Surprised murmurs rose from the crowd as they parted, revealing a lone young man in the middle. Ryu shivered where he stood, fear nearly tearing the heart out of his chest. As Nobu's eyes fell on him, Ryu bravely stood his ground with a determined glare of his own. Nobu gave Ryu a short glance, before looking at his son for confirmation. Toshiro narrowed his eyes at the boy with confusion, not really recognizing him, but nodding to his father nonetheless. After all, his attacker had struck him from behind before he could see him. All right then. Nobu smiled benevolently, waving at his men who held Hina down. As they released her, Hina quickly scrambled away and towards her father in the crowd. Nobu then nodded towards Ryu. Kill him. Ryu sucked in a deep breath between his teeth and turned to run. He was stopped dead in his tracks with widening eyes as he realized he'd been surrounded. The ominous sound of a sword unsheathing came from behind him, and as he turned, one of the samurai whom had crept up on him raised his blade with a war cry. Stumbling back in fear, Ryu fell to his back with eyes locked on the falling blade. Suddenly, a woodcutter axe flew through the air, all the way from the other side of the town square. The crowd gasped in shock as the axe slammed into the samurai's chest, sword still held above his head as his eyes widened in surprised shock, before tumbling to the ground. Nobu's eyes turned to steel and snapped his gaze towards the direction of where it had come from. Naruto walked slowly towards the man he just killed with an unamused expression, ignoring Ryu whom laid on the ground looking at him as he approached. Coming to a stop over the corpse and having willingly walked into the middle of being surrounded by samurai, Naruto kicked the corpse over before grasping the handle of the axe. Yanking the bloodied axe out of the samurai's chest, Naruto looked towards Nobu with a bored expression. You wanted the man who defied your rule. Naruto drawled sarcastically, before scoffing condescendingly. He had never had any respect for the leader or his men, but now that they found themselves at knife point there was no longer any need to hide his opinion. Well, here I am. Nobu pursed his lips again, before looking at his men. Upon his nod, the samurai around him all drew their swords and began converging upon Naruto. Ryu. Naruto muttered, glancing at Ryu still frozen on his back from over his shoulder. Move. With a moment's hesitation, Ryu scrambled away from the scene. Naruto tightened his hold around the shaft of the axe, standing in a relaxed position with the weapon hanging from his grip. His eyes flitted over the men who paced around him, slowly shifting his feet to count them all. Naruto counted 7, a few remaining close to their master. One at his side suddenly decided to attack, lunging forward with a thrust towards Naruto's chest. Grasping onto the handle of the axe with a wide grip, Naruto deflected the weapon to the side before harshly shoving the blade of the axe in a cutting motion across the man's face. Not letting him recover as he screamed, Naruto swiped his legs from under him before slamming the axe down upon his back. As the surrounding samurai converged on him, Naruto swung wildly at them, forcing them to take a wary step back to avoid getting their head chopped off. Naruto could have ended it quickly if he used his clones or the Rasengan, but he had not used those tools in many, many years and would prefer not to. One samurai gave a war cry and lunged at him, motivating some of those nearby. Sidestepping the downward slash, Naruto spun and slammed the blade of the axe into the man's back, before pulling the man with the axe still buried in him into a spin. Naruto threw him into another who was charging at him, sending them both tumbling into the ground, one already dying from the fresh, opened wound at his back. Hot, searing pain suddenly burst out from his back and Naruto gave an involuntary roar of pain as his skin was split open by the sharpened edge of a katana, forcing him down to one knee. Turning quickly, Naruto gave a wild swing and swiped the legs from under the samurai who had cut him. Naruto angrily slammed the axe into the samurai's face a second after, charging to his feet as the nearby samurai were newly motivated after seeing his blood. As he stood, Naruto picked up the katana from the killed samurai, flinging it towards one who was close. The force was enough to send it straight through the samurai's chest, whose eyes widened in shock, dropping his own weapon before succumbing to his initial instinct of trying to remove it from his own body in shocked panic and futility. Turning towards another, Naruto made the mistake of raising the wooden handle to block as one struck towards him with his blade. Realizing his mistake a second before the katana struck, Naruto swayed away an inch away from the katana as it cleaved the handle of his axe in two. Quickly dropping the broken pieces, Naruto threw himself at the overextended samurai and grappled onto his arms, stopping his reversal cut. He received an elbow to his face for his trouble, but the pain was easily ignored and his grip remained firm. Quickly sending a knee into the man's groin, Naruto spun and dragged the samurai in front of himself as one of his comrades charged at him from behind, keeping the samurai between him and the others. Reaching around the head of the hunched samurai, Naruto quickly enhanced his muscles with chakra and wrenched the man's head around, snapping his neck like a twig with a sickening sound. His other hand, still on the dead samurai's sword hand, quickly disarmed the corpse as it fell and rose the blade in a reverse grip to block a cut for his face. With a growl of exertion, Naruto sunk to one knee, using his falling weight to stab through the samurai's leg. As the man hunched over his limb in a scream, Naruto quickly ripped the blade out, before spinning to the side into a downward slash that beheaded the man a second later. Almost frantically and with wild eyes, Naruto sunk into a wide stance, blood dripping from himself and his blade as he observed the men now warily stepping away from him. With a guttural growl, Naruto took a threatening step forward, hunched and resembling more of a beast than man. The samurai responded by taking a fearful step back, now wary of their opponent. "You're not without skill," a drawling voice interrupted from the side. The crowd had long since dispersed, seeking cover by the many buildings around the square, yet eyeing the events with wary eyes. Nobu had risen, his golden-trimmed garbs fluttering gently in the wind as he approached, a hand on the handle of his sword still in its sheath. As he came to a stop in front of Naruto, Nobu waved away his samurai, the cowards all too happy with backing off. "What is your name, young one?" Naruto frowned and rose from his hunched position, taking the opportunity to relax as his clothes billowed in the wind. Staring Nobu down, Naruto noted how deathly quiet it had become. "I'm just a commoner, nothing more," Naruto finally shrugged, his voice cold and dismissive. Naruto couldn't care less about the scum in front of him. He was a thug and a bully, not royalty. Nobu chuckled and shook his head, his cold eyes gazing at Naruto with curiosity. "You became something much more, the second you stood up to my son," Nobu drawled with the hint of a smile. "You became something even greater, by killing my men and now, threatening my rule." Naruto felt his hackles rise at the man's words. He reeked of narcissism and superiority complexes. Behind his cold eyes, Naruto could clearly see the unsettled mind of a megalomaniac. "Your rule," Naruto began smiling condescendingly with a scowl. "You are the ruler of nothing. It is a power given to you by the daimyo that you have abused since the day you were given it." Hoping to incite some anger in the man, Naruto was disappointed as he simply chuckled at him. "Clever, trying to incite anger in your opponent," Nobu muttered, a glint in his eyes. "I was once an officer within the daimyo's army. For my services, I was granted lordship over this town to do with as I wish. I have every right to rule here." Naruto merely shrugged at his words with a hateful scowl. "Then the daimyo is a fool!" Naruto barked loudly. Nobu and everyone else who was watching widened their eyes in shock. No one ever dared speak badly of a daimyo, as they were seen as something close to the gods themselves. "During the years I have lived here, I have seen your men, your own sworn samurai, abuse the people they have been sworn to protect. People you have been sworn to protect." Naruto spat out a glob of blood from his mouth. The wound he'd received earlier had already closed up, no longer bothering him. "If it is the will of the daimyo that you rule here, then to hell with him. To hell with you." Dashing forward, Naruto rose his blade overhead as he was upon Nobu withing the second. The man widened his eyes in shock, his hands moving to draw the blade in order to block. Clenching his teeth together, Naruto pushed chakra to his arms, his bulging muscles straining at the force he pushed forward with. Nobu was fast enough to draw and raise his sword in a horizontal block, trying to stop Naruto from cleaving him from shoulder to hip. Unfortunately, the man had no idea about Naruto's background, nor ability with using his chakra to reinforce his muscles. The blade slammed into Nobu's regal blade with force unlike any swordsman Nobu had ever seen, pushing his blade down and out of the way. Naruto's blade cut deeply into Nobu's shoulder, severing arteries as it cut deep beyond the shoulder bones of his body before coming to a stop. Nobu's eyes widened, his face contorting into an expression of shock and pain, mouth opened in a silent scream as his blade fell from his fingers. Naruto glared at him with a determined expression, ignoring the shock screams from the crowd looking at what was happening. Ripping the blade loose in a downwards manner, Naruto simultaneously forced the man to his knees while drawing it out of his flesh. While Naruto was sure the man had been a fierce warrior during the man's tenure as an officer, he had underestimated Naruto greatly. He was a vile man who would receive justice for all the lives he marred with his influence. Slowly, Naruto rose the blade above his head, a look of disgust upon his face as he looked down at the kneeling leader. Naruto hated himself almost as much as he hated Nobu for what he was doing, but for the sake of his friends and the village as a whole, Nobu needed to die. As Nobu looked up at Naruto with a shocked expression, disbelief still prevalent in his expression, Naruto let his arms fall, the blade descending faster than the eye could see. Nobu's head fell from his body, his essence leaking from both severed ends and soaking the earth. Silence filled the square, samurai and townsfolk watching alike as the young man stood over their now dead village leader. Stabbing into the ground, Naruto let his blade stand anchored to the ground as he kneeled. Grasping the hair of Nobu's head, he made eye contact with Toshiro, Nobu's son who stood frozen by the fountain, trembling with fear despite the death of his father. He was a coward through and through, despite his posturing over the defenseless villagers throughout the town. As Naruto rose, he lifted the severed head of Toshiro's father towards the sun, his hateful glare bearing down on the cowardly son. For you, you craven coward! Naruto hissed, throwing the head towards him. Toshiro yelped as it landed in front of him, jumping to the side in fright to avoid the head coming too close to himself. Naruto scoffed at the display before glaring at the samurai around him. They stood scared and confused, unsure on what to do. Naruto recognized many of them and knew them to be guilty of the cruelties they had done to the people over the years since he'd settled there. People of Kazara! Naruto roared out, rage and bloodlust still in his veins. His roar drew the attention of everyone present, and they gasped at the sight of the young man, covered in blood with eyes which seemed alight with fire, his irises sharing the color of the blood draped across his body. Nobu is dead. The man who have abused and used us for years is gone forever. Naruto leveled his glare on Toshiro, who seemed to shrink in on himself. Only his son is left to succeed him, and you all know his disposition towards us common folk. The very reason we are here today is because a young brave man attempted to stop him in having his way with an unwilling woman. Naruto yelled, turning around as he looked to the townspeople surrounding the square who looked at him completely enraptured. His eyes found Ryu, the man he was speaking of before continuing their travel over the crowd. He is nothing more than a parasite. He and his samurai are only as brave as the blade in their hands allows them to be against unarmed and peaceful folk. Take up arms, my people! Naruto roared again, blood thundering in his ears. This had gone beyond what he originally intended, but years of oppression was now resurfacing with his anger, a flame having been fanned to life like a forest fire. Take up arms! Take up arms and strike down these criminals who call themselves our protectors. Like a buzzing beehive, the crowd emerged from the roads and alleys of the village, scowling with foul expressions on their faces. The samurai that had so far been surrounding Naruto had quickly turned, leveling their weapons fearfully towards the approaching crowd who were yelling obscenities at them. Toshiro turned from face to face in the angry mob, his fear making way for childish indignation and fearful petulance. Stay back. I am your leader now, and you will do as I say. One step closer and I will. You will never be the leader in this village. Naruto roared as he stalked towards Toshiro with a scowl. The son turned towards Naruto fearfully for a moment, before surprising Naruto with a show of bravery as he charged him. Waving the sword above his head like a fool and screaming like a goat, Naruto narrowed his eyes and readied his blade at his side. As Toshiro was upon him, Naruto deflected the blade with a hard blow, sending the blade out of Toshiro's hands and to the side. Before he could respond, Naruto used the back of the blade to swipe Toshiro's legs from under him. Seeing this, the crowd burst into activity, emboldened by Naruto's actions. Like a single entity, they converged on the remaining samurai with little regard for their own safety. The samurai cut down an attacker each maybe, before the crowd swarmed them, forcing their swords out of their hands before ripping the rest of them apart with rage. With a war cry that was mirrored by the crowd a second later, Naruto rose his blade to the sky. Take back our homes. Naruto walked somberly through the former leader's home. It was finally quiet now, the people's rage having subsided after hours of reckless rampage. It had been fairly easier than what Naruto had expected, despite the few townspeople that had died. Most of the guardsmen in Nobu's pocket had either fled or been killed, leaving the town on foot or on horse. A few, along with Toshiro, Nobu's son, had been captured by the angry mobs. Despite having no weapons, the townsfolk outnumbered the guards 10 to 1, armed with tools meant for utility, yet dangerous when applied with wild abandon. As Naruto paced slowly through the former leader's home, it was obvious that Nobu had been a well-traveled individual. Hanging like ornaments on the wall were blades of different shapes and sizes from different cultures around the world, the floors lined with exquisite carpets, and large paintings on every wall in every room. Satin curtains separated many rooms, silky pillows used for chairs. Naruto figured these were all trinkets and souvenirs from his time abroad as a soldier, probably looted through conquest. Everything laid strewn about, the larders emptied of all food by the mob who had raided the house. Naruto imagined the house having been in perfect pristine order before their rebellion, but now it was a shadow of its former self. This place was a palace, having been used for only Nobu and his family. Every winter Naruto had lived there thus far had resulted in refugees from the south dying from the cold and the starvation in the streets, yet all of this space could have easily housed many of them, effectively saving their lives. Naruto sighed, rubbing his eyes tiredly. It had been a long day, the sun almost about to fully set outside. It had all gone out of hand, yet Naruto couldn't find it in himself to be unhappy about it. Nobu deserved to die and all of his sworn samurai with him. Naruto had restrained himself for so long, keeping his desires to protect the villagers from oppression in the deepest pits of his mind, yet today had finally forced his hands. Was it worth it? Naruto went over to a window, leaning onto it tiredly as he watched the celebrating villagers roam the streets of their village. They were all drinking and eating with wild abandon, despite winter being few months away. There was little one could do to stop them, now that all the samurai were gone, but that wasn't Naruto's problem any longer. He would have to take to the road in the morning, resting for tonight. After a while of thought, Naruto finally left the palace, entering the outer gardens which led to the entry gate. The second he left, a familiar voice interrupted him in his path from behind. "Thank you, by the way." Stopping in his step, Naruto smiled and turned to give his friend a sidelong glance. "It's all right." Naruto shrugged at Ryu, who stood a couple of feet away with an apprehensive expression. An awkward silence fell between them, before Ryu approached, questions already dancing in his eyes. "So what are you gonna do now?" Naruto frowned. It wasn't the question he had expected, but an interesting one nonetheless. He'd given it a fair share of thought. "I will rest for tonight, I believe," Naruto murmured, smiling at a young couple who amorously made their way past them, too lost in each other to notice him and Ryu. "Tomorrow, I will travel south." "Where?" Ryu frowned, obviously not liking what he heard. "Good question." Naruto joked, and they shared a chuckle. "Wherever the road takes me, I suppose." "You don't have to leave, though." Ryu stepped closer and laid a hand on his shoulder. "You have a place here and there are no more samurai, no more Nobu or his son to worry about." Naive. Ryu was still so innocently naive, but Naruto couldn't find it in himself to rein of his parade. He couldn't find it in himself to tell him that the daimyo would merely send another to tax their village, as was his right as ruler of the lands of Earth. Before Ryu could argue further, Naruto held up his hand defensively with a smile. "No need to discuss this tonight, though. Shouldn't you be celebrating tonight?" Ryu blushed, much to Naruto's confusion. "Yeah, well, that's kinda why I was looking for you to begin with." Ryu sighed. "During the battle, I made sure Hina was safe before I rejoined the fight. I met up with her family after, when the celebration started, and got invited to celebrate with them." Naruto smirked, which Ryu noticed as a scowl came over his expression. It was ruined by his blush, though. "Shut it. I wanted to ask if you wanted to join, but if you're going to be an idiot about it." No, I'm sorry," Naruto interrupted with a laugh, apologizing sincerely. "I want tease, in truth I am happy for you. I'll join you, if only to make sure you won't make a fool of yourself." Ryu grumbled as he began to lead the way. Naruto supposed they would be celebrating at Hina's family home since the inn had burned down. Shame that, considering the building had been passed down throughout her family for many generations. If he remembered correctly, it had been one of the first buildings erected in the village many years ago. As they walked along the rowdy street, they passed many villagers, some mourning their fallen, yet most in celebration. Many recognized Naruto, praising him as he passed with Ryu. It was a new experience for him, considering he was used to being reviled for the thing he contained. Despite having been admired by some before the day's events, this was something of a whole new level. Naruto found himself liking it as villagers loudly praised him and clapped him on his back in passing. They eventually arrived at a more quiet part of the town, allowing Ryu and Naruto to talk in peace. "So where did you learn to do that?" Ryu asked. "Learn what?" Naruto murmured as he trudged alongside of his friend, allowing himself to relax at the peaceful silence. The stars and the moon was up, lighting up the unlit parts of the town. It was a beautiful night as far as Naruto was concerned. "You know what?" Ryu elbowed him in the side, ignoring the scowl Naruto threw him. "Where did you learn to fight like you did? I've never seen anyone move like that." Naruto pursed his lips. He had no intentions of revealing much of his past, since it would only raise more questions he was in no way prepared to answer. "I wish I didn't have to," Naruto began truthfully, continuing when Ryu looked like he wanted to protest. "What I did was something I learned during my misspent youth. It's not who I am any longer," Naruto murmured softly. Ryu looked like he wanted to push, but let it wisely rest, seeing that his friend was unwilling to answer. They eventually came upon a decently sized house, 2-floor and long in width. The dirty windows were lit up in ongoing celebration, people yelling and singing inside. "We're here," Ryu mumbled, looking nervous as they stepped up to the door. Naruto smirked, but refrained from teasing his friend. He was happy for him, even if it had to take him risking his life stupidly for the girl of his affections for him to actually begin to interact with her. Knocking on the door, the celebration inside didn't lower in volume at all, but after a minute someone finally opened the door. Hina greeted them warily at the door before a bright smile lit up her face upon seeing Ryu. Giving the boy a hug which set his face aflame, Ryu was promptly pulled inside by an eager Hina. Looking at the drunk crowd inside, Naruto was left outside in a moment of reflection. Hina either had a very large family, or they had invited their neighbors over to join the festivities. Taking a deep breath, Naruto stepped inside. Naruto woke with bleary eyes, the taste of dry cotton in his mouth. Blinking, his vision was swimming as he took in the dim lighting in the room, his head pounding fiercely. It was dark and dusty, the smell of old wood filling his nostrils as he sat upright tenderly. He was in a small room without windows and no lighting. He could barely see enough to make out a door at the wall next to the bed. Frowning, he glanced down at the bed he had awoken in, noting with a sense of relief that he was without company. He couldn't remember much from the day before, other than that Hina's family had been quite festive and willing to share what they had. He remembered Ryu and Hina conversing by themselves while Naruto entertained the rest of the adults. A mug of something quickly evolved into another, and before Naruto knew it, he'd been in a right good mood to make a fool out of himself. Naruto snorted with amusement of himself as he carefully stood, minding his shot balance. He'd been singing and dancing like a madman like the rest of them. He couldn't for the life of him remember seeing neither Ryu nor Hina for the rest of the evening. He reckoned Hina's father had probably thrown a fit if he'd been in a proper state of mind and not neck down into his mug like everyone else. Nobody could blame him. His daughter had escaped a horrible fate twice in a day, and their food hall burned to the ground. It would have been a surprise if he hadn't been drinking. After a moment of disorientation as he stood, he regained his balance enough to move for the door. Entering the hallway, he was greeted by the sight of the corridor in the second floor, the stairs to the living rooms, and the exit below right in front of him. The house was old, but not run down, as it was clearly taken very well care of, but one could see and smell the old wood in its foundation. Peeking out of the window, he noted it was incredibly early in the morning, the sun still below the mountain tops that framed their valley in the far distance. Moving slowly down the stairs, he grimaced at the pounding headache which protested each step. While he had never truly experienced a hangover like most due to his incredibly high metabolism, he was more dehydrated than he could remember ever being. He was usually never able to get drunk due to his physiology either, but Hina's family had been generous with their alcohol and filled his cup every time before he could empty it. They poured it fast enough for him to get affected when he downed the cups as quick as he did. He didn't even know what it was that they had served him. Probably something foul and strong they'd made themselves. It made sense considering what he could remember from the taste and the smell. As he entered the living rooms, he quickly noted Hina's father, Hiroto, cleaning the dishes used the day before by their kitchens. They got eye contact almost immediately and froze in an awkward standoff. Naruto's sense of decorum came after a couple of seconds, and he quickly bowed in apology. "I'm sorry, Hiroto. I had hoped to take my leave before anyone was awake." "It's no trouble," Hiroto muttered, smirking tiredly at him, and continued to clean the dishes. "You look like shit." Naruto was surprised by Hiroto's manners for a second, but brushed it off quickly. They'd spent a night drinking together, he supposed it shouldn't surprise that they could be informal now. Naruto snorted, quickly regaining his thoughts. "Feel like shit too?" Hiroto chuckled in response, shaking his head as he moved to fill a mug with water. "Sit," he commanded, moving towards the closest table where he put down the glass, obviously expected Naruto to seat himself. "Drink. The way you were knocking him back yesterday have got to have left you dry." "That's putting it mildly." Naruto grinned shortly, looking at Hiroto warily. He wasn't used to people treating him so kindly. "I really don't want to be a bother, It's rude if you don't drink when offered." Naruto closed his mouth as he was interrupted, but couldn't help the amused smile that came over him. "I remember you saying so yesterday too. I'm regretting listening to you now." Hiroto barked a laugh as he moved to fill a mug with water for himself. "Brat." Hiroto moved to seat himself across from Naruto, so he quickly moved to accommodate his wishes. Would be rude after all. Naruto thought it best to not mention that he could barely even remember them talking yesterday. After a couple of sips, Naruto leaned heavily onto the table, holding the cool mug onto his temple between drinking. He breathed deep and looked at Hiroto, who currently ignored him in their comfortable silence. "Sorry about taking up space throughout the night." "Sakai," Hiroto grunted. "'Twas I that put you there anyway." "Oh." Naruto frowned. Again, he wasn't used to such kindness. "Don't be so rotten surprised," Hiroto grumbled with that sardonic smirk of his. "Least I could do, considering what you did for us yesterday." Naruto sensed an uncomfortable topic in that, quickly clearing his throat in search for another. "Any idea what happened to Ryu?" Hiroto's eyes got filled with dry amusement as he glanced at Naruto. "He and Hina disappeared to her room last night." He shrugged, ignoring Naruto's shocked and widening expression. You were deep in your cups, so I ain't surprised you don't remember. Oh. Naruto muttered dumbly, wondering if Ryu had lost his mind. Yeah. Hiroto snorted at Naruto's expression. If you don't mind me asking, you're fine with that? Naruto frowned at Hiroto. When the father's eyes darkened into a scowl, Naruto couldn't help but feel smaller in his chair. Hell no. He grumbled. But the tyke risked his life for her, despite not knowing which order to put his feet in front of the other. Can't help but respect that, so if Hina wants to spend time with him, I ain't gonna say anything. Naruto nodded warily at his dark expression. It obviously still rubbed the father wrong. So nothing. Hiroto nearly barked. I still expect that little cunt to take responsibility. Ain't right, spending the night together the way they did. Least he can do is make them both honest about it. Now Naruto couldn't help but snort, barely restraining his laughter as his head ached. He merely shook his head at Hiroto's questioning glare. He didn't think Ryu would be too torn up about that demand, but that was his problem now. So, Hiroto continued after a couple of more minutes of comfortable silence. What are you gonna do now, HM? Naruto was in the middle of drinking as he heard the question. He took his time, carefully thinking over his answer. His decision from yesterday was still in the front of his mind. I'm thinking of leaving. Hiroto nodded sharply after a moment of silence. Where? South. Naruto muttered. Somewhere. Haven't figured out where yet. Smart. Hiroto muttered, standing up to return to his other duties, continuing to clean the house after yesterday. Can't say I blame ya. Really? Naruto lifted a brow. Nah. Hiroto shrugged. Unlike the rest of them fools around the village currently eating away at our winter storage, I know what's coming for us. Naruto closed his eyes with a grim expression of understanding upon his face. So you know the daimyo will send another to take Nobu's place? Obviously. Hiroto muttered. It's his lands, after all. Whoever he sends will bring soldiers. Soldiers with the intent to punish us when they find out what we did to them last once. Hiroto sighed, a dark look in his eyes. Won't matter who did what or who didn't do what, they will punish us all alike for what we did to Nobu and his samurai. News about what happened are bound to spread. And then they'll come. Naruto murmured, a haunted look in his eyes. He couldn't help but feel responsible for the situation the village was put in. And then they'll come. Hiroto agreed, wiping a glass clean harshly. Thundering down the road from the quiet vein, with horses, swords and bows and the intent to kill. Naruto sighed. The quiet vein was the single path through the mountains around them which separated them from the world outside the valley. As far as Naruto knew, there was no other way into the valley unless you fancied a deadly climb. It had been given its name due to its eerie silence through the narrow mountain pass, the path riveting like a vein all the way down to their village as it was created naturally through many years of usage by travelers. We still have some time until then, Naruto murmured. It was a hollow comfort, one Hiroto obviously didn't care to hear as he shook his head with contempt. While not aimed at him, it still stung. Are you going to attend at the very least? Hiroto questioned after a little while. Naruto looked at him questioningly. Hiroto sighed with an emotion present on his features that Naruto couldn't decipher. The execution? Naruto sucked in a sharp breath of air. He had forgotten about that. The crowd was hollering fiercely as Naruto pushed his way through. A makeshift stand had been put up in front of the burned-down food hall, a symbol of the atrocities that had been done against them by the noble family and their samurai. Coming to the front of the crowd, Naruto stopped to observe the event. A young man, his own age most likely, with a sharp face, brown, long hair kept in a ponytail stood on the stand. He wore typical light brown linen clothing like the rest of them, and watched the crowd expectantly as they hollered and jeered loudly. After a minute, he lifted his hand and the crowd fell to silence. We all know why we're here, he yelled out, and the crowd roared its approval. Naruto remained quiet as he watched the proceedings. Nobu's dead. Struck down by our champion. Naruto frowned at those words. While the praise would normally make him smile, he didn't think anyone deserved praise for the bloodshed that occurred. His wife, along with what little samurai we didn't get our hands on, have disappeared to the winds. Naruto drew a relieved breath at that. While Nobu's wife had been just as guilty as the husband and son, Naruto didn't trust the townsfolk in making her death clean. Nobody needed to see the result of that. The young man leaned down to yank free a woodcutter axe that had been lodged in the wooden stand. Raising it to the side, he roared out to the crowd yet again. Now, only the despicable son remains. Bring him forth. The crowd roared to life again, this time with vengeance as some more young men brought Toshiro, Nobu's son, forward. His hands were tied up behind his back, eyes sunken and tired, lips busted. His feet dragged unresponsively along the ground, and it was clear that he had been beaten within an inch of his life. As sympathy welled up in Naruto upon the sight, he forced himself to remember why they were there. Why he had risen up against them to begin with. Neither Ryu nor Hina would be there if Toshiro had his way. The young man on stage was charismatic, no doubt about that, and the young men dragging Toshiro up were obvious followers. Naruto suspected he'd probably led a part of the riot yesterday, gaining a lot of respect among his peers. No other way they would be following someone their own age with such devotion. The young men dumped Toshiro at his feet on top of the stand, but the young man had to step away as the crowd hollered and took the opportunity to throw things at Toshiro. Naruto pursed his lips with dislike. Couldn't they just get this over with? The man catered to the crowd and let them have their way for a short while until he raised his hand again to demand silence. Toshiro Fujita. For your crimes against our village, we sentence you to die. The young man spoke, a sense of apprehension clearly seen in his body language, though he hid it well to everyone but Naruto. It was clear the boy had never done this before, and Naruto found it reassuring that one with such respect had second thoughts about what he was about to do. Do you have any last words? Toshiro was silent for a moment, shivering like a leaf. He muttered lowly, refusing to lift his gaze, but Naruto would assume he was pleading for his life. The young man on stage merely wrinkled his nose in disgust before shaking his head. The crowd stilled in expectation as he lifted his gaze to look over the crowd, maybe to gauge their approval. To Naruto's dismay, the young man's eyes fell on Naruto and widened, a smile growing on his lips. Naruto. He smiled, saying his name almost reverently. The crowd quickly followed his gaze, murmuring and cheering Naruto's name as they realized his presence. Our champion. Would you join me? Before Naruto could even open his mouth, the crowd behind him shoved him forward. Naruto apprehensively made his way up, although he didn't want to, but he recognized the opportunity to say his piece to the crowd after Toshiro had been dealt with. Finally, Naruto stood before the young man and the quivering Toshiro, apprehension on every inch of his face. The young man in front of him smiled brightly, almost reverently at him as he approached. Naruto. He bowed, reaching the handle of the axe in his hands towards him. Would you give us the honor of sending the worm on his way? Naruto very nearly said no, but the words halted in his throat. While he didn't want to kill Toshiro himself as he'd grown bloodsick as it was, the sight of the axe in the young man's hand made him change his mind. Naruto wanted it over quickly, but a woodcutter axe was no executioner's weapon. It would take the young man several attempts to sever head from body, prolonging the brutality longer than necessary. Naruto, on the other hand. Sighing, Naruto nodded and grasped the handle. What's your name? Naruto murmured, observing the green eyes of the young man in front of him. He blinked in surprise as he relinquished the axe. Sho, he said uncertainly, still in a half bow as he regarded Naruto. He couldn't understand the deference in his manners, but Naruto would respect it nonetheless. As they separated, Naruto grasped onto the handle tightly, ignoring the eerily quiet crowd that watched. Refusing to think on it longer than he had to, Naruto raised the axe above his head, pushing chakra into his muscles in preparation for the strike. With a single blow, the head was separated from its body and Nobu's line was gone forever. The crowd screamed joyously, as if now all of their problems were gone forever. Naruto felt hollow with guilt as he dropped the axe, disgusted by himself and his actions. Was this what he had become now? An executioner for the public's amusement? Sir? A voice called out to him among the roaring crowd, pulling Naruto out of his dark musings. Snapping to the side, he saw Sho looking at him with worry, but Naruto's mind stuck with the honored title he had addressed him with. Sir? It was something you addressed a man of a house as when you intended to court his daughter. He was much too young to be called something so silly, but Naruto refrained from commenting. He wouldn't step on the respect he was given. Sho, Naruto murmured, throat suddenly dry. Seeing as he had Sho's rapt attention, he nodded towards the crowd. I'd like a few words, he said, trusting Sho's ability to quiet the crowd. True enough, as Sho nodded and raised his hand, the crowd stilled and looked at him expectantly. Our champion wishes to have a word. The crowd's gaze fell on Naruto, and he swallowed in discomfort. This was so far out of his comfort zone as one would get, but it needed to be said. My friends, he began, pausing to take a deep breath and wearing a grim expression. I know you have felt the need for celebration, perhaps even more now, but I implore you all to pause and think. The crowd muttered in confusion at him now, noting his grim features, but Naruto continued. Nobu and his men may be gone, but these are still the daimyo's lands. He will be incensed when he hears of our rebellion. It is only a matter of time until the news reach him." Horror could be seen in their faces now as realization dawned, silence growing. Naruto continued before anyone could stop him. "He will send another to take Nobu's place, but before that, I promise you, he will send samurai, men of war, to Kao and punish us." He let his words sink into the crowd. Silence first, then low murmurs. People began to whisper frantically to each other, rising in volume until their worries eventually directed their way towards Naruto. "What should we do? What about our homes? My family? Our livelihood?" Louder and louder they yelled, eyes fixated upon Naruto as if he had the solutions to all of their problems. His eyes were widened in shock as the people, his people, were screaming at him for a solution. This was not what he had in mind at all. Why did they expect him to have the solution to their problems? The thought and doubts made him nearly panic, but Sho eventually managed to calm the crowd. As they quieted down, Sho walked closer to Naruto, worry in his eyes. "What should we do?" Naruto nearly snapped at him due to stress and the fact that yet another voice asked him to help them. It wasn't why he was there, he simply wanted to warn them. As Naruto turned, however, he saw the look in Sho's eyes as he stared at him. Trust. No matter how misplaced it was, Naruto could easily see the complete and blind trust in Sho's eyes as he looked to Naruto, as if knowing that Naruto would have the answers to aid their people. Seeing that trust made the snarl disappear before it had appeared and stopped the words about to burst from his lips. That trust was something completely new, something he could have never remembered having been given before. That trust brought forth a surge of doubt to the answers Naruto thought he knew. Taking a moment to think, Naruto looked out towards the crowd and with dismay saw the same trust in their eyes that Sho had in his own gaze. Steeling his nerves, he did his best to not let his inner turmoil show. Taking a last, calming, deep breath, he addressed the crowd. It was late in the evening. Naruto had retreated into Nobu's mansion where he had, in his preparations, found a large table with a map in one of the side rooms, a map over the entirety of the elemental nations. Leaning onto the table with furrowed brows, Naruto was eerily quiet in both sound and mind as he watched the map with calculation. What in the world was he doing? Taking a last, calming, deep breath, he addressed the crowd. "Now," Naruto began, showing more confidence than what he felt inside. "Now we prepare to defend our lands." With a pregnant pause, the crowd erupted into a loud cheer which filled the valley. A pit of dread filled Naruto's stomach. His forehead thudded into the table upon his thoughts and memories. He had lost his mind, that could have been the only explanation. Had he had any sense left, he'd left like he had said he would. But the people trusted him here. He wasn't Naruto, the dead last, the failure and the disappointment. He wasn't the demon brat or a monster. He was their champion. They completely and utterly trusted him to lead them towards a brighter future. His sense of preservation told him to book it, but he couldn't throw away the treasure he'd found in the people of Kazara. He just couldn't. "Okay," Naruto muttered as he stood, looking at the map again. He needed to do this, no matter his clouded focus. Rubbing his eyes, he let his gaze fall once again to the map. In the southernmost region of the Land of Earth, near the borders of the smaller countries of Land of Stone and Land of Grass, laid their village in the Kazara Valley. The quiet vein, the mountain passed through the mountain chain which closed them inside, opened the valley with a road towards the southeast. Naruto knew, even if it wasn't marked upon the map, that there was a village a couple of weeks' time northwest for their mountains. It was from there the daimyo's men would come from, but the escaped samurai of Nobu would likely travel to the south, into the Land of Stone in order to procure horses for travel before riding towards the capital. This was good news since it meant they had over a month until the news arrived at the capital. After that, Naruto would assume it would take any men the daimyo sent for their valley another month to arrive at the edge of the quiet vein on the other side of the mountain. Naruto realized, however, that this was only if the escaped samurai did not receive any shinobi help. If they did, which was unlikely, the news would arrive much, much sooner, altering the timetable. Their options, as far as Naruto could see, were few. They could close the valley, fill it with stone and debris from the surrounding ridges, but it would shut them off from society. They were, as a rapidly growing village, in dire need of trade. Without trade, many would starve, and while they had some farmers, they were mostly hunters or craftsmen. Even so, Naruto kept it in the back of his mind as a viable option. Another would be to abandon the village. They could pack up, take with them whatever necessities they needed, and escape either further into the Land of Earth or any direction towards the south or the southeast. If one went far enough, the land of wind lay to their south and the land of fire to their southeast. If they should do this, he was more interested in going towards the south and land of wind than towards his former home, but he doubted the people of Kazara would abandon their village just yet. They were proud and foolish, and he doubted he could convince them. This was a more viable option than the first, the way Naruto saw it, but he already knew the villagers would never agree to it. The last option he could see, not counting surrendering themselves to the daimyo's forces, were to fight. It was the option he dreaded the most, but he also knew it was the only option the villagers would accept. Naruto sighed and rested his forehead on the palm of his hand. He already knew it was the option they would have to take, when all things were considered. Considering the facts, Naruto knew it could have been much worse. The daimyo would never send his army. Why would he? He'd give the responsibility to a nobleman who would in turn bring his own men, most likely the size of a platoon of 100 or so fighting men. In size, the villagers of Kazara Valley easily outnumbered them, but they would have armor and proper weaponry with the knowledge of how to use it. They would strike hard and fast, as was their way of the blade, and give no mercy to whoever resisted. Naruto grimaced with despair. He really didn't see a positive end in all of this. They couldn't win, not in the long term. Best he could do were to delay them. Leaving the table with a thoughtful frown on his face, Naruto began to pace back and forth. He supposed his deduction wouldn't be entirely true. They had a strategically sound location. There were no nearby villages the daimyo's forces could supply themselves from. They could easily wait them out in a fight for attrition. This could easily be done if they closed the vein, but he was hesitant to remove their one way of escape, trade and communication with the outside world. Naruto paused, frowning deeply. What did they have to fight with? They had no armor or proper weapons. All they had were tools and crafts and people too stubborn to know what would be best for them. An idea dawned on Naruto, a smile growing at the corner of his lips. They had wood and stone, more than they could ever have a use for. With that idea in mind, a calm finally settled over Naruto's nerves. Maybe they actually had a fighting chance. Morning came too soon in Naruto's opinion. He had fallen asleep, exhausted by the planning he'd done over the night, and eventually dumped his body on some of the remaining pillows in Nobu's old mansion. For some reason most of the villagers stayed far away from the now empty palace, perhaps a force of habit. Either way, Naruto intended to now use it as a staging ground to organize the defenses of the village. It laid in the village's center and near the town square, so it would be easy to go where he wanted. As he yawned and neared the doors of the exit, he paused for a moment as he heard the loud argument right outside. Frowning, Naruto opened the doors and was greeted by the scene of nearly 10 grown men, including Sho and Ryu, in a wide and loud argument with one another. Blinking, irritation quickly filled Naruto as he sunk into a scowl. It was still way too early in the morning for such tomfoolery. "Shut it!" he barked, his voice piercing the air and silencing everyone present. They jumped in surprise, snapping towards Naruto in response. "Against all of the odds we're facing, you are already squabbling like children among ourselves?" Sending an admonishing glare across the crowd, including at his elders more than double his own age, he was satisfied when each and everyone shamefully looked down in front of them. "Now, what's this about?" "My lord." Sho took a brave step forward, bowing deeply at the hip in deference. "We have been arguing about our next course of action. We are unsure as to what we are to do." Naruto's jaw fell open in shock, before he regained his composure in shock. "My lord? My lord! First it was sir, and now my lord?" Absolute madness. Naruto nearly corrected Sho, but his eyes traveled across the crowd on the steps below him. All of them, even his elders, seemed to agree with Sho's deference. None showed any resistance to the title laid at his feet. While it was true that Naruto had spent the night in the former lord's palace, Naruto hadn't planned for a title such as lord to stick the day after. Thinking more deeply on it though, he supposed that in a way of rank, that was what he was now. They had all asked for his words, his guidance, and he was now committed to lead them through the difficulties ahead. By all rights, he was now their acting leader, their lord in any other situation. Glancing over at Ryu, Naruto couldn't help but smile and give his friend a small nod. He looked like he was about to have a serious case of conniptions in the shock of seeing everyone defer to Naruto in the way they were. Last thing Naruto wanted was for his friend of nearly 2 years to treat him in the way that Sho was, even if he appreciated the respect. Taking a deep breath, he looked over the rest of the men present. There were several of the elders across the village, among them the blacksmith, a couple of the owners from the largest shops and farms, and some of the construction managers. It was obvious that these were men who had taken it upon them the responsibility of beginning to organize a defense, but they needed a guiding hand to lead them. He supposed Sho would represent the young, capable fighting men who followed him from the start of their rebellion, but why Ryu was there was beyond him. He supposed his friends simply wanted to talk. Please, Naruto said, nodding to the crowd as he gestured for them to enter. We have much to talk about, it seems. As the men entered, Naruto gave them all passing smiles until Ryu came up to him. So? Ryu grinned cheekily. Do I have to call you Lord now as well? Naruto snorted in amusement, clapping his friend on the shoulder before dragging him inside. His presence would be appreciated, even if it was not necessary. They eventually filed into the wide room with the map across the table where Naruto had spent most of his prior evening to plan and think. Standing at the head of the table with the full attention of all, Naruto began to relay his thoughts. All who were capable would begin to chop wood and gather stone. They needed walls and defenses. The carpenters would enlist people to make wooden palisades, spears and javelins, bows and arrows. The work ahead of them were significant, and their eyes were wide upon the responsibility. Naruto promised them that they would receive all of the help necessary if they needed it. There were little need for iron to be made into weapons, since they would never be able to properly arm everyone before the daimyo's men would come, so the rest of the different craftsmen around the table were quickly delegated to assist the carpenters along with the rest of the workforce they could spare. They still had a village to maintain after all, so some would need to continue their day-to-day routines. For hours, they continued their meeting, counting resources and drawing plans, discussing the locations of the walls and where the palisades would be raised. Naruto had been a very well-traveled individual when he arrived at Kazara, having traveled long and wide and often through conflicted territories. He'd seen the many different ways people had waged war, how they'd sieged their cities and moved their armies. Most of the men and women of Kazara wasn't as traveled as he, so Naruto had to spend a frustratingly long amount of time to explain certain ideas to them. Honestly, the idea of digging trenches to stop horses shouldn't be a concept so difficult to understand. Even so, they all accepted his guidance without much complaint. Quite opposite, after his dispatchment of Nobu and his men, most seemed to treat his every word with a sense of reverence that had formerly belonged to Nobu himself. His deductions about Sho also proved to be correct. He had led a bunch of young, willing fighting men under the rebellion and gathered quite a following. They would be the integral part of the fight to come, a blade Naruto had every intention of sharpening to a fine edge before it would be used. While Naruto had once been a shinobi, he had no intentions of making that known or teaching them to fight like one. There was no time for that, nor would most of them be capable to learn. No, the key to their victory would be to teach those who would fight to use a bow and arrow, the spear and javelin. While it had never been a strength of Naruto, he had still picked up some basic knowledge of how such weapons were used by common soldiers and samurai, or from hunting, and he would teach the people all he knew. Finally, the time for talk was over and the sun was about to set. They were all starving as they had spent the majority of the day planning and debating. By Naruto's leave, again surprised when they asked him for his permission, everyone except Ryu left with sworn promises to begin what they had agreed upon the next day. As the last man left the palace, Ryu looked at Naruto with a somber expression. I assume you've decided to stay? Naruto sighed, before nodding. Ryu smiled, relief present upon his expression. Good. His face suddenly grew a cheeky smirk. I'm still never going to call you Lord, though. Naruto barked a loud laugh at that, tension already leaving his body as he shook his head. I don't expect you to. Naruto chuckled, shaking his head with a thoughtful expression when he came down from his laughter. Lord, that was a shocker to hear. Yeah, you tell me. Ryu snorted, leaning onto the wall. I suppose it shouldn't have come like a surprise to me, though. How you figure that? Naruto frowned. Ryu merely shrugged. You fought Nobu and his men so easily and so bravely, men our village has feared for years long since before you and me came around these parts. Ryu rubbed his chin, looking at Naruto with an envious expression. Honestly, I'm a bit jealous. Naruto furrowed his brows in worry. That didn't sound good. I didn't want to do the things I did, Ryu. Naruto began, shaking his head at his friend. I didn't want to kill anyone, but it was us or them. I never intended to become Lord or some such nonsense. Not that. Ryu interrupted him with a wave, halting Naruto's sentence. I don't envy your position. I'm jealous of your power. Naruto lifted a brow in surprise. My power? Yeah. Ryu sighed, crossing his arms defensively. He obviously wasn't comfortable talking about it. You are in the position you are in now, because I put my fool self in danger twice in one day. And you rescued me both of those times. I'm useless. Ryu murmured in the end self-deprecatingly. Ryu. Naruto muttered but stopped himself to think for a second. He had to choose his words carefully. There was obviously some damage to Ryu's pride, and Naruto did not want to harm their friendship. I can do the things I do, because I was raised to be used as a weapon. Naruto began silently, ignoring Ryu's shocked expression. At the time, I didn't mind, hell, I cherished it. But now, I wish I never had to learn those things. I wish I didn't have the blood on my hand that I do. That kind of blood, Naruto muttered silently, but seriously as he met Ryu's gaze. That kind of blood sticks with you. Doesn't wash off, no matter what. It's not something to be proud of, it's something nobody should have to do. You shouldn't envy something like that, you have something infinitely more precious. Silence grew between them. Ryu shuffled uncomfortably, before looking up at Naruto hopefully. I do? Ryu was an orphan of war. He came from nothing and had obviously expected to always be nothing. He didn't know how lucky he was though. You do? Naruto muttered sincerely. A thought came into his mind and Naruto smiled cheekily at his friend. You have Hina now for one. His words had its effect as Ryu's face lit up like a bonfire. Sputtering with embarrassment, Naruto couldn't hold it any longer and roared in laughter. Tension broken, the two friends bantered lightly back and forth for a while before making their way out of the palace. They were both starving and needed to eat. As they spoke, Hina's father had been true to his word and nearly flogged Ryu when he woke in Hina's embrace after the celebrations. Ryu told him the entire ordeal, including the part when he promised Hiroto to make them both honest about their relationship. Naruto tried to play nice with Ryu throughout the story, but he couldn't help but laugh at his friend as he congratulated him upon the engagement. Even so, despite how Ryu swiped after Naruto's head in embarrassment, he could still see the big grin on his face as he recounted everything that had so far happened between him and Hina. Naruto was happy for him and hoped it worked out. They deserved some happy moments, before the daimyo's men came knocking. I think you're wrong though, Ryu eventually muttered as they trudged down the near-abandoned street, looking for some place to eat. Oh? Naruto muttered, glancing at his friend. Wrong about what exactly? About the shame you feel for the things you can do, Ryu responded. As Naruto frowned and opened his mouth to reply, Ryu continued. You can say it as much as you want, that you shouldn't have to, that nobody should have to do the things you can do. In a perfect world I would have agreed with you. Ryu sighed. But this isn't a perfect world. The things you can do, the things the daimyo's men can do, can be used for good or evil. Nobu and his men used it to exploit the common folk, used it to their own selfish purposes. You used it to save us. Ryu looked at Naruto with a determined expression. I would give up the life I live now in a heartbeat to be able to fill such a responsibility. At least then, I would know I could protect Hina and her family. Ryu looked away from him then, obviously not keen on hearing Naruto's response. Naruto himself wanted to deny his friend's words, but resigned himself to a despondent sigh. There were rarely such a thing as good and evil, but he would never discuss philosophy with Ryu. He was far too naive, seen far too little of the world to see all the nuances of gray in the debate of good and evil. Things were still black and white for him. Despite his reluctance, Naruto couldn't help but feel like there was some truth to Ryu's words. He had once dreamed of protecting his people in the hidden village of the Leaf, as a Hokage. Being the strongest, in a position of power to do so much great, yet potentially horrible things. Was it really so bad to be in such a position, when you intended good for those important to you? Naruto shook his head and trudged along. He was too hungry and tired for this. The next morning, Naruto had met with Sho very early. The boy had met him outside almost immediately as Naruto had left, eager to begin his assignment. The borderline worship made Naruto a little uncomfortable, but he wouldn't look a gift horse in the mouth, so to speak. He ordered Sho to gather those willing and capable of fighting at the northern edge of the village for instruction. He hoped someone would show themselves capable of learning faster than the others so they could take over the role of instruction, because Naruto couldn't be bogged down himself to teach them every day. Since Sho needed some time to get some volunteers together, Naruto decided to check up on the rest of the village to see if things were going according to plan. He had a fleeting idea to use his shadow clones to lighten the workload, but he quickly wiped that thought from mind. He'd barely used any of the shinobi techniques since he left the Leaf Village. It would pull attention towards him, from other shinobi including the nearby villages. Since it was in the nature of shinobi to be naturally twitchy, Naruto really didn't want the attention. There was also the chance that if the daimyo got news of someone in their rebellion being capable of using chakra, he would send shinobi to solve the issue. That was a ken of problems Naruto was in no way interested of opening just yet. As far as he was concerned, the less anyone knew of his abilities, the better. He didn't want any attention from any shinobi villages or any missing nin at all, and that included his former village. Taking a tour through the village, He was pleased to see people working of cutting down the nearby forest, already transporting wood into the workshops where men and women alike were already carving the wood into what they were supposed to be used for. Seeing the people at work was a good thing that brought relief to his mind. The economy had become a bit problematic in the wake of loss of leadership. Nobu's treasury had of course been raided during the rebellion, all of his hoarded gold gone to the wind throughout the village. People had spent the money in wild abandon, and the need for certain wares and resources had increased due to the reckless use. Getting people back in work was good for their society as a whole, and Naruto hoped it was a sign things were stabilizing. He didn't want to step in with an iron fist of ruling unless necessary. He had issues regarding himself as their leader to begin with anyway. Eventually he made his tour throughout the village and was satisfied in its progress. They wouldn't have to start digging trenched until at least a week, and by then they should have some palisades up at the very least, and the makings of a wall. He made his way to the northern edge of the city, and found Sho alongside of the young, eager men willing to fight in the near future. As he walked into the clearing among them, they all stood and watched him expectantly. They were all so young. A few were older, naturally, but most were his own age. Too young to die, in his mind, but they all had a right to fight for their home, same as he. To his surprise, he saw Ryu among them, looking at him expectantly with a stoic, determined expression, mirroring that of everyone else present. Naruto supposed he shouldn't have been surprised to see Ryu there, wanting to learn how to fight, but a part of Naruto wanted to send him away. He couldn't. It would be harmful to Ryu's pride and egotistical of Naruto to refuse to teach him just because he didn't want him hurt as a friend. If Ryu wanted to learn, he had the right, same as everyone else despite their friendship. Gather around, boys. Naruto waved them over, observing them as they gathered close. Tense but eager. While they didn't have any proper weaponry to train with just yet, they could still begin to train with the bare basics, such as hand-to-hand combat. While fundamentally different than fighting with spears or anything else, some principles carried over, such as footwork and warrior mentality. While they were eager now, he intended to work them to the bone. They would hate him for it, but the more they sweated now, chances were they would bleed less when the true battle came for them. They didn't have time for soft treatment. Naruto quickly ducked, weaving narrowly beneath Sho's strike, the wooden practice staff grazing his hair. Quickly moving within range of Sho for hand-to-hand, Naruto slammed his fist into Sho's sternum. The strike pushed him backwards, leaving his lungs and debilitating him, and before he could regain his composure, Naruto twirled the staff in his own hands to jab him in his gut. Sho managed to sidestep, blocking the jab with his own staff before throwing himself into a lunge towards Naruto midsection. Already seeing an overextension where it occurred, Naruto deflected the strike and kicked Sho's leg from under him. Letting Sho fall to the ground hard, Naruto kicked him in the side to remind the boy to move. Falling to the ground was no excuse to give up. The enemy didn't care if you lost your breath or footing, they would kill you the same. Sho rose into a spin, swiping wildly after Naruto, who again narrowly dodged it. Repositioning themselves again, Sho heaved for breath as sweat ran down his bare torso under the baking sun. Naruto wasn't even winded, but the comparison was quite unfair all things considering. Alright, enough, Naruto said, smiling at Sho, whose tension left his body immediately. Leaning onto his own knees to catch for breath, Sho grinned proudly. He'd done much better against Naruto than anyone else today. Naruto patted him on the back and told him so too, before observing the rest of the training field. 2 weeks had passed since their first preparations, and the village was beginning to look like a proper war camp. Wooden, sharp poles made out of trees formed the walls surrounding the village in its entirety, watchtowers raised at the corners of the village. The trenches were well underway, but that was a huge undertaking and would take much more time than the walls. In the field around Naruto, as of that very moment, was filled with men practicing combat with wooden staffs, simulating combat as they blocked and struck at one another under instructions from Naruto, or those he had given the responsibility to instruct others. While there had been quite a few volunteers in the beginning, Naruto had feared it wasn't enough and begun a steady rotation where everyone who was old enough and fit enough had to practice. He delegated people between practicing archery and fighting with spears and javelins, and quickly given permanent roles regarding who did best and what they needed the most. The townsfolk had grumbled and protested, but Naruto wouldn't have it. The support he had with Sho and his initial men had also formed the beginnings of a local militia, setting up watch routines and patrols through the village. Few dared to speak ill of Naruto with them nearby, as everyone knew their loyalties. Despite this, Naruto was still very well respected, so their grumbling had been only a minor setback. Watching over the people practicing all around him had him smile hopefully for their future. They were beginning to look like a proper fighting force. Not real soldiers still, but maybe just enough to come out on top. At the edge of the field, lined up as a crowd along the wall, sat a gathering of girls and women of varying ages, enjoying the scene in front of them while speaking pleasantly at one another. Naruto had a creeping suspicion a lot of the guys had begun to train without shirts to impress more than to counter the heat of the sun, but he said nothing on it. He kept his shirt on nonetheless. Moving towards the nearest gate through the wall, Naruto rubbed his chin in thought. There were a lot of the women who had wanted to fight as well, at least assist with archery, and Naruto was more than willing to approve of the assisted force, but many of the bigoted and old tradition men had protested very vehemently. Gender roles had never meant much growing up in a shinobi village, but it apparently meant a great deal for common folk. Personally, Naruto didn't see why it mattered if you were a man or a woman when the enemy came and pointed their swords at both genders alike, despite varying intentions. Naruto sighed and rubbed his neck. Perhaps he was thinking too much on this. Nearing the gate, the man in the watchtower yelled for them to open for him. Or he yelled for them to open for their lord, but Naruto still hadn't grown used to that yet. The men saluted as he passed them, and Naruto smiled and nodded kindly in response as he moved along. Naruto had a creeping suspicion they merely mirrored what they had seen of the samurai and guardsmen that had been there before them. The mirroring duality was an eerie thing to think about, and Naruto didn't want his thoughts to linger on that subject. He had noticed he'd grown a tendency to brood lately, something he found very unattractive. The town inside the walls was a bustle of life. Townsfolk milled about with their busy lives, and one could almost think they didn't have a looming conflict hanging over them. While many did their everyday work to keep the village afloat, one could see many busy producing arrows, spears, and palisades still, and it revealed their situation to any who knew of their intended greetings for the daimyo's armies. As Naruto made his way through the town, Naruto smiled and nodded at people passing him by. Nobody showed him their backs, clearly respecting his position with bows and mentions of his new title. It was almost surreal to Naruto, how the people treated him. He had mixed feelings surrounding Ai as he felt, for the first time in his life, that he was respected for the good he had done for the people around him, but he doubted himself due to the stain the title had been brought upon by Nobu and his ilk. Naruto eventually made his way over to the palace, which was where he had taken up residency since his elevation. It was a welcome upgrade, despite much of the interior having been ruined during the rebellion. It was still nicer than the shack which he had now given away to a newcomer, another refugee from war in the Far East. As he closed the door behind him, Naruto sighed wearily. Silence. It had rarely felt so sweet. Naruto adored the treatment he now received, he truly did, but he missed certain perks of anonymity. Peace when in public was one of them. Moving his way through the palace, he began to remove articles of clothing on his way to the bedroom, letting them lie childishly around wherever he tossed them. He hadn't taken servants, even if the size of the palace almost demanded it regarding maintenance, but he would think on that later. Finally, out of the filthy linen clothing he used for training, he moved to wash himself. After, he dressed himself in some of the more common-looking clothing Nobu and Toshiro had left behind. Most were extravagant robes and silk, but some looked like normal clothing that common folk would use as well. What he currently wore were a black cotton shirt and pants combo with sandals. It had probably been something they wore within the privacy of their palace, as the cloth, while simple, felt good and soft upon his skin. He refused to wear the robes and the silk, he intended to sell it in due time anyway. If he was still alive in the end to do so, that was. After a while, he left the palace again and made his way towards Hina's home in order to see Ryu. After Toshiro's execution, Hiroto had opened the activities of the former food hall from his own home, as they had a large enough house to do so. Ryu had moved in with them in order to help out with the family business, due to his new commitment with Hina. Here, Ryu muttered, putting the food down in front of Naruto at his table. Enjoy. Naruto looked at him with amusement present as his friend seated himself across him. The hall had a couple of occupants, but not so much that Ryu apparently couldn't take a break. Hina stood with her father by the kitchen conversing, while sending smiles at Ryu. I'm assuming things are going great? Naruto drawled quietly without looking at his friend. Ryu smiled and nodded at him. Yeah. Hina's great. Ryu muttered before sighing with irritation. Her father, on the other hand. Naruto smirked at his words. It was obviously some lingering resentment towards Ryu for his audacity regarding the celebrations half a month ago. Well, what do you expect? As Ryu protested his comment, Naruto let himself reflect on the time that had passed. Ryu was on another training rotation and didn't have practice that day, but he'd still grown leaps and bounds like most others. It was obvious that the spear wasn't something Ryu had a talent for, not like Sho and a couple of others, but he was beginning to get decent. Naruto would soon have to train them in fighting from a semi-formation. While he didn't expect them to form a perfect spear wall just yet, some battlefield discipline would be essential nonetheless. As Hiroto yelled for Ryu to get his lazy ass back to work, Naruto merely smiled at the back and forth banter between them. It was obvious that Hiroto had much respect for Ryu despite the shit he gave him, even if Ryu couldn't see it himself. Left alone with his thoughts, Naruto ate thoughtfully. He'd been reading through Nobu's numerous journals from his travels lately and learned more than he ever thought he could have. One could say anything they would about the late noble's morals, but he had been well educated as an officer and very well traveled. One entry in particular had interested him. During his travels through the Land of Wind, Nobu had described a clash with local brigands that had given them a surprising amount of difficulty. The brigands had used shields that were half the size of a man in height and wide as one in width. It had rendered their bowmen useless and given them much difficulties in combat, as their spears kept them at bay while defending with their shields. Shields wasn't unheard of, but the daimyo's men never used them as far as Naruto had ever heard or seen. By their way of the sword, a shield which was meant to prolong the battle wasn't honorable, as most samurai believed the battle should be won through a single, decisive blow. Naruto couldn't care less about honor, they fought to survive. These people weren't warriors, not a single one of them were samurai willing to die for a lofty goal such as honor. Nobu's journals had described how these brigands gave them great difficulties. He described in detail their formations and how they fought, and Naruto intended to make their strength his own. Chances were, the daimyo's men would fight the same. With that in mind, Naruto finished his food and rose. Can it be done? Naruto looked at the carpenter. Around them, people were hard at work with making tools and weapons for the coming weeks. The carpenter rubbed his chin with a thoughtful expression. It can be done, if we push back our production of them other things you need. The carpenter frowned, piking up one of the nearby wooden poles which laid about. If you don't mind me asking, my lord, why do you need these spikes? He questioned, picking up the wooden spike to look at it. These are much too thick and unwieldy for spears and too thin for your palisades. What you gonna use them for anyway? Happy with the carpenter's cooperation, Naruto merely smiled at him indulgently. A surprise, my friend. 2 more weeks passed, and they finally hit the 1-month mark. At that point, they had begun implementing shields into their spearmen. The shields were simple blocks of wood, wouldn't do much good against anything heavier than a katana or an arrow, but it would keep them alive against an arrow volley. The shields had so far been a hit among them, even if it had been a little bit touch and go in the beginning, seeing as Naruto had no idea himself how to use shields. The blacksmith had been finally tasked with a job more fit to his craft regarding weapons of war. While they couldn't make proper swords for everyone, they had enough to make simple and small hatchets for the spearmen and the archers. From what Naruto had read in Nobu's journal, the brigands had drawn short swords when met in close quarters, when Nobu and his men had gotten past their spears. It made sense to Naruto that they would have weapon options beyond a long and unwieldy spear if the enemy got past it. Last thing you could do when fighting in a formation was to wave around a long spear when you stood shoulder to shoulder. Ryu had excelled in regards of fighting with a hatchet, but Naruto was wary to use him with the rest of the spearmen. Instead, he'd put Ryu with the bowman for now, and Ryu luckily didn't seem to care either way as he'd taken to the bow very well. A week after the 1-month mark, the trenches were done, both the small ones and the large ones which Naruto had them all cover up, making them impossible to see at distance. Defensive palisades were raised in the fields, which would break up any cavalry charge Nobu's men would attempt. Naruto was worried the trenches and the palisades would scare off visiting traders, but they hardly seemed to care anyway. He made sure everyone knew where they could and could not go though, as the last thing he wanted was for his own people to fall into the hidden trenches. He tasked his militia, who had taken upon themselves to name them People's Guard, to patrol the perimeters at any point of day to make sure nobody went near the trenches. Because of their aggressive forestry, an open field had appeared around their village. The watchtowers and whoever patrolled the walkway on the wall could easily see a few hundred meters off into the forest. It was in these fields they would wage most of the fight. Another idea for a surprise for the daimyo's men had been learned through Nobu's journal, and Naruto had made his people gather enormous amounts of grass to dry and bundle up. When he explained his reasoning to his confused advisors, they'd been impressed by his creativity and set to work immediately. The season had thus far been almost unbearingly warm and dry, so they would have to be careful to avoid setting the entire valley on fire. This was the way the weeks passed, and people nearly forgot what they were all preparing themselves for. At around the 2-month mark, one of the scouts Naruto had tasked beyond the quiet vein to look for their threat came riding into the town with a fearful expression on his face. The daimyo's men are here. They are 1 day away, my lord. Sho bowed. He, like the rest of the fighters, were dressed up in a uniformed armor patched together with leather and linen. It wouldn't protect them much against any direct cuts or stabs, but grazing cuts were less likely to bite their skin. They will be here in the morning. Naruto stood with his back towards his advisors as they gathered around the table in the aptly named war room. Naruto took a deep breath and turned away from the window to eye his advisors. Fear. Fear was present upon each of their faces. 2 months ago, they had all screamed for blood, the rush of victory over Nobu's men filling them with false bravado. But 2 months was a long time to put fear in a man. Even so, Naruto trusted them to hold. Fear would keep them alive some seconds longer at the very least. Show. Naruto began, looking at the man who had become one of his commanders in the field. Double the guard and have all fighting men on standby throughout the night. If they sleep, they do so in their armor with weapons an arm's length away, understand? Sho nodded. Jiro. The man in question stepped forward. Get the townsfolk ready. Those who cannot fight must be ready to escape through the northern exit, should we fail and if the daimyo's men breach the wall. Lead them around and away from the battle. If possible, escape through the vein if it is unguarded. If not, make your way as deep into the valley as possible. Chances are the army will leave after they take the town, if not you can evade them in the forest for weeks. Seeing another grave nod, Naruto turned towards another. Ichiro. The carpenter in question stepped forward. Trenches ready? Aye. Arrows at the wall? Aye. Naruto smiled and nodded, taking a deep breath. This is what we have been waiting for. It's what we have been preparing for. Naruto let his gaze travel between each member of his council. I know you might be afraid, and that's fine. You'd be mad if you weren't. They shared a small laugh at that, some tensions leaving their muscles. Even so, this is what our people, decided the day we rose up against Nobu and his ilk. We will see this through to the end, understand? At the collective nod, Naruto sighed and waved at them dismissively. Good. Now spend time with your families. Honest folk shouldn't die on empty stomachs. His dark humor had its intended effect as the men laughed on the way out the door. As the last man left the room, only Ryu was left with a somber frown upon his features. Naruto. Ryu began, drawing his attention. We're friends, right? Naruto cocked a brow at his friend and looked at his questioningly. Of course. Ryu nodded at that. And friends are always honest with one another? As much as is reasonable, yes. Naruto pursed his lips, wondering where his friend was going with this. Then Ryu sighed, before looking at Naruto with determination. Then you would tell me our honest chances of seeing this through? Without lying? Naruto sucked in a sharp breath. So that was what it was about. Giving it a moment of thought, Naruto nodded. I would. Ryu breathed in relief at that. And? It was a good question. One he didn't wish to bring up in front of the rest of his people. He trusted Ryu wouldn't speak to the others of it. It depends. Naruto began with a frown. If they come with the numbers I expect, then we have a fair chance of winning this, for now. At least until the daimyo sends the next batch of soldiers. Naruto breathed and shook his head. Since the scout who arrived couldn't properly make out their army's size through the forest, chances are they are many more than what we think. But honestly, Naruto trailed off with a dark look in his eyes. Honestly, in the long term, there is no way we are coming out on top. Silence grew between them for several seconds, before Ryu took a deep breath of resignation. He'd obviously had that suspicion already. Seemed like his friend had more perception than what Naruto gave him credit for. I see. Ryu murmured somberly. Looking towards his friend, Naruto gave him the bravest and brightest smile he could. Don't think about this for now. Hina deserves your company more than I right now. Naruto smirked at his friend's blush. He was still so easy to rile up. Go on. We have a long day tomorrow. With a parting nod, Naruto was finally left alone in his study. Breathing in the night air, Naruto shrugged to loosen up the muscles of his shoulders. Surprisingly, he didn't feel afraid. He remembered the feeling of fear well from his time as a shinobi. He remembered freezing up during the wave mission, how he fought for his life during the Chunin exams. But it wasn't fear which gripped him now. Only a sense of calmness. A sense of purpose which Naruto hadn't felt in many, many years. As Naruto walked past one of the many rooms in the building, a sight upon the wall pulled his attention. It was a halberd, probably a weapon picked up from far away during Nobu's travels. It was a little bit longer than himself with a wooden shaft, metal engraved at two of its sides to protect the wood from harm. At the end, a bladed piece of metal stood, formed like an axe with a sharp spear point at its top. It was a simple design, but for some reason it pulled his attention. To most of the other villagers, it would be an unwieldy weapon to use, especially in formation with a shield, but for Naruto. Leaning forward, he grasped the handle and pulled it from the wall. The morning air was crisp, yet not quite cold. It was a hint towards the colder times that was on its way. The sun had yet to rise and not a single bird could be heard singing in the trees. Dusklight greeted Naruto's eyes as he left the palace, halberd in hand, shield in the other. He'd armed himself in leather armor much like the rest of the fighting men. While there had been a few armors for use within Nobu's palace, he didn't think it would be fair for the rest of his men that he wore better armor. Wouldn't make a good example. As he left the palace grounds, Sho was waiting for him by the exit. Coming to a stop before the young man, Sho bowed and gave Naruto an approving look upon seeing the halberd. Their greeting was not one of words, but no less meaningful before they made their way together towards the town square. An impressive sight awaited him. His people stood lined up and ready, as per his exact orders. Archers on the left side of the square, his spearmen on the other. The townsfolk who weren't going to fight stood around the edges of the square, watching with scared and tearful expressions as they looked for their loved ones about to fight for them. Coming to a stop as he entered the square, Naruto paused to appreciate the sight. Everyone looked to him silently, Sho at his side as faithfully as ever. Ryu stood by the archers, looking to him like the rest of them. It was a lonely, yet powerful realization of the power he now possessed. This entire village, the entire people was his, and they would listen to his every command. With a stoic expression, Naruto walked across the square to inspect the men and few women he had trained, many personally over the course of the 2 months. Walking across the gravel, the only sound that could be heard was the gravel beneath Naruto's feet. There was no talking. No wind. No birds. Nothing. Walking slowly across his spearmen, he looked them each in the eye as he inspected their armor, way they carried their weapons. While they weren't proper soldiers, they had still managed to instill with some discipline. Satisfied, he did the same with his archers, inspecting their leather quivers and oaken bows. The arrows didn't have metal points, but it mattered little as most samurai wore little plating, instead opting to use light armor such as leather. It would be of much better quality than they had, but their arrows should still prove useful. Having inspected them all, Naruto came to a stop in front of them all, their gazes locked on him like his were on theirs. He had spent the night thinking on the perfect words for this day. What words could he have said to calm their nerves, to put bravery in their hearts before the clash mere hours away? Nothing. He would lead by example, and his actions would push them forward. After a heavy moment of silence, Naruto gave Sho and Ryu, each at their respective position by the spearmen and the archers, a nod. They snapped around towards their men, drawing their attention immediately. To the wall. They both called as one. OSU! The fighting force roared as one, and sprung into movement. At the instant moment of the command, the sound of boots upon gravel filled the air as the men and women that were going to fight moved for their positions. Naruto clasped his hands together with the halberd resting against his shoulder, and watched. The sense of foreboding yet pride he felt upon seeing them was a new sensation to Naruto. He saw people running past their families and loved ones, giving them their potentially last goodbyes as they passed. Ryu gave Hina a short kiss, who cried silently as he moved away from her again, Sho sharing a few words with his sister, his only living relative as far as Naruto knew. After a minute, people were still scrambling to ready themselves at their positions, and Sho and Ryu came up to Naruto alongside of each other. Almost ready, my lord, Sho murmured. With a nod, Naruto strode towards the gate. Standing on top of the wall, over the gate which pointed out towards the quiet vein, Naruto narrowed his eyes upon the movement in the forest. He could see armored men scouting for the village, and he knew the daimyo's men were soon upon them. Hours had passed since they made ready for war, and the sun was now in full bloom above them. Its glaring heat went ignored in favor of pre-battle nerves. An archer next to Naruto, a boy younger than himself, suddenly heaved and puked, nerves obviously not agreeing with his last meal. Naruto ignored it, despite his sympathies, and continued to scout ahead into the forest. Minutes passed and the scouts eventually disappeared into the forest. This was it. Naruto knew the daimyo's men wouldn't stop to parley with them. In their eyes, they were criminals and murderers, rebelling against their rightful lord and undeserving any mercy. When they came, they would throw everything they had into a decisive blow, such was their way of the sword. Seeing movement in the forest, Naruto could hear the sound of horses galloping along with the war cry of 100 men. The sound sent a shiver down Naruto's spine, but he refused to let it show. Open the gate! Naruto barked and turned briskly, making his way down the ramps on the wall. Men yelled in confirmation and opened the gate before the wide row of men which Naruto would personally lead into battle. Coming down the ramp, Naruto gave Sho, who would fight alongside of him, a nod, before facing the gate. Taking a deep breath, Naruto tried to calm his beating heart. "Forward," he said in a firm voice, and Sho nodded. "Forward!" Sho roared. "OSU!" the men behind them yelled. Breaking into a jog, the entire platoon behind him mirrored his movement and followed bravely out the gate. His shield and javelin in his left hand felt light, his halberd in his right bobbing along with his jogging steps. Adrenaline was beginning to rush past his ears now in preparation for the coming battle. He couldn't imagine how it was for those behind him, those who had never been in a true battle for life and death. As the last man left the gate, it was promptly shut behind them. They jogged quickly past the many wooden palisades which laid around the village and into the open, flat field in front of them that was between them and the forest. The sounds of horses and war cries from the forest were loud now. "Spread out," Naruto said to Sho, coming to a stop as the rest halted behind him. "Loose formation." "Spread out. Loose formation," Sho roared next to him. The platoon moved out into a line with 5 rows, about 30 men in width, making them a force of about 150 fighting men. The group of archers behind them which had followed crouched and waited behind their lines. "Stand ready!" "OSU!" they thundered again as they pointed their spears forward in a hunched and battle-ready position. Every breath felt as if it was unnaturally long now. The urge to hyperventilate had begun to grow, and Naruto had to remind himself to breathe slowly. 200 meters in front of them, a contingent of samurai on horseback came riding out of the forest, straight for them. Their war cries thundered across the field, shaking the men in their shoes. "Now, my lord?" Sho questioned nervously, but Naruto shook his head. Dust rose from the horses as they ran, their riders wearing intricate golden armors of leather and iron, ornaments depicting dragons and heroes upon their vests. Those who didn't wear masks depicting demons and whatnot were almost close enough to see their frothing snarls. As they passed the 150-meter mark, Sho questioned him again, but Naruto couldn't even hear him as he observed the riders. He would assume they had about 120 men, not counting anyone in reserve. At the 100-meter mark, Sho questioned him again and sounded like he was about to panic, but Naruto ignored it. The riders could be seen in clear detail now. At the 70-meter mark, his men were about to panic and break rank, but that was when it happened. Their horses stepped into the hidden trenches that they had covered with branches, leaves, and dirt. The trench was 5 meters wide and deep, poles of spikes in the bottom. As the upper, thin branches broke the layer under the hooves of their horses, the first in the line fell, horse and rider both, into the spike pit. Naruto couldn't see the result, but they could hear the pained screams of the many riders who suffered at the bottom. The lucky ones died instantly. The riders behind them quickly halted, their horses rearing up on their hind legs in panic as the riders behind them nearly pushed the front further into the pit. Smirking, Naruto gave Sho a nasty grin. "Now," Naruto growled deeply and Sho nodded. "Archers forward!" Sho roared. The spearmen stood rooted in their loose and open formation, while the archers behind quickly ran through up to the front, forming 2 rows of about 30 men in width in front of them. "Knock!" Sho continued, and the archers knocked their first arrows in preparation. Drawl, the archers pointed their bows towards the air in front of them, and drew their arrows back in their strings. "Loose!" At his last command, the archers let their arrows fly. The volley rained across the field, and the panicking samurai were too late to realize what was happening. The volley rained over the riders and the horses, but the wooden tips of the arrows, no matter how sharp, did very little damage. Their armor took the brunt of the damage, but some arrowheads managed to pierce, causing both the unlucky horses and riders to scream. As the first volley hit, Sho had already begun his command for preparing the next volley, which quickly followed the first. Naruto frowned as Sho continued to rain arrows on them. Dust and panic among the enemy riders made it difficult to see and judge how many were left, but every one of them who fell was a gift to be relished. One less soldier to harm his own after all. After a minute of punishment, the daimyo's men eventually figured out where the trench ended and made their way around. Most of their horses were either panicking or had been wounded, so the samurai had abandoned the animals. Naruto almost snorted with amusement. So far, this had been much easier than expected. Whoever was leading these men had obviously underestimated them gravely. As Sho ordered the last volley, Naruto glanced over at him. "Archers, retreat!" "Archers!" Sho roared faithfully. "Retreat!" As the archers turned and made their way back through the spearmen ranks, Naruto caught Ryu among them. "Ryu!" Naruto barked, drawing his attention as he passed him by. "Prepare for flanking." Ryu nodded and ran along with his unit. Glancing over his shoulder, Naruto saw the last of the archers make their way out of the spearmen's loose formation. Ready javelins? Ready javelins! Sho roared. All the spearmen lowered their spears to the ground, switching their grips on the javelin from left hand to the right. Javelins at the ready! On my command, Naruto muttered, receiving a nod from Sho. The daimyo's men had made it past the trenches, but their fear of another arrow volley had obviously rendered them unable to think straight as they hadn't resumed their formations. With nerves as steel, Naruto calmly reared his javelin back in preparation for the throw. The men around him mirrored his action. As the enemy ran past the 40-meter mark, the tip of the javelin rested right next to the tip of his nose. Throw! Naruto roared, and Sho for once didn't repeat his words. They let their javelins fly, raining towards the enemy forces. Naruto saw his own javelin slam through the body of one of the samurai in front, several more falling to the javelins of his men. The soldiers remained just as motivated as before, however, and continued to storm past their fallen towards the town. Ready spears! Naruto growled, adrenaline really beginning to push into his ears now. Ready spears! Sho roared, and the men quickly picked them up again, readying themselves for the enemy now only a short distance away. Spears ready! Close ranks! Close! Quick as they could be, everyone huddled together, shoulder to shoulder as they formed a wall of shields and spears. Naruto's breathing picked up, and he could hear the men around him suffering the same as the samurai were now right in front of them. Brace! Naruto roared right before the samurai charged into them, leaning into his shield as the wave of enemy ran straight into them. OSU! With a snarl, Naruto stopped the first one to reach him with the tip of his halberd, stabbing forward and piercing the warrior's armor at the middle. The chakra in his muscles sent spears straight through the armor, but the axe prevented the spear from going further. Drawing his halberd back, Naruto grit his teeth as one of the warrior's comrades ran straight into his shield with his shoulder. All around them, the samurai with their broken formation rammed into their shields where a bloody dance as old as time began. Lifting his shield to prevent a cut to his face, Naruto stabbed blindly again and again as he did his best to block whatever the samurai attempted to throw at him. Nicks and cuts got to him eventually, but they were only minor. The men behind him pushed up against his back with their own shields, stopping the first line from being pushed backwards as they used their own spears in a reverse grip to stab at the enemy from above their own front line. Seconds passed as they shoved and stabbed at the samurai who fought with reckless abandon. While it was obvious these warriors had little to no experience fighting against the shield wall, they were warriors while Naruto's men were not. They had the numbers, however, as every time one of Naruto's fell, another quickly took his place at the shield wall. A chorus of war cries came from the side of the samurai, and Naruto smirked as he fought onward. Ryu and his archers had pulled out their hatchets and were now running straight for the samurai's flank. Armed with shields and hatchets, they looked like brigands as they slammed into the samurai's backs. The difference in pressure from the samurai at the spear wall was felt immediately as the samurai attempted to fall back to get more control of their flanks, but Naruto would never let them. Break ranks! Naruto roared and stepped forward and out of formation. Stabbing a samurai through the back as he turned, he blocked another one strike from the side and swept his legs from under him with the halberd. Before the man could move, Naruto slammed the edge of his shield into the samurai's face, his strength bursting the man's skull like an egg upon the dirt. Fight free! OSU! The men roared and like a starved beast fueled by fear and bloodlust, and charged forward into the now retreating samurai. Despite their superior training, the samurai now floundered. Attacked with hatchets at one side and spears from the other, the few who attempted to fight on were quickly mowed down by their superior numbers. With a fierce grunt, Naruto drove the axed blade of the halberd sideways into the chest of a samurai who attempted to flee. Locking the handle under the pit of his arm, he used his body for leverage to swing the halberd back quickly like a pendulum. The samurai he'd aimed for threw himself to his back, the spear swiping by the tip of his nose in a miss. Grunting in exertion, Naruto used the momentum he already had to push the halberd away from his body into a twirl at his wrist. Hefting the halberd in a javelin-like grip, he jabbed forward towards the downed samurai who screamed briefly in protest before he was silenced forever. Drawing his weapon back into a standard grip again with a grim expression, Naruto took a breather to observe the battlefield. The samurai were now in full retreat, but he doubted they had seen the last of them. His men, both spearmen and archers with hatchets alike, were chasing down the remaining samurai, cutting them down as they fled the area and ran back towards the forest. Cease! Naruto roared, and his men slowly, but surely began to make their way back to the walls of their town. Tend to the wounded. Get them inside. Sho and Ryu, where the hell are you? As his men began the grim task of tending to their wounded and dead, dragging both towards the town, Ryu and Sho ran up to Naruto looking relatively unharmed. Ryu had a gash at the side of his head, Sho a limp at his right leg, but they looked fine otherwise. You both alright? They both nodded and Sho looked to him with worried eyes. And you, my lord? I'm fine. Naruto waved him off. Get our people fed, rested, and aid for those in need. I want full control of how many capable we have left to fight with. Naruto muttered, casting a glance over his shoulder towards the forest where the samurai was still running towards. I don't think we have seen the last of these fuckers. Naruto sat at a box outside many of the town's workshops. He watched his men lying around at makeshift blankets as people doted on them, bringing them water and food in their break from the fight. To the side, in the shade of the wall, lay the wounded. In the end, they had done better than what Naruto had hoped for. Only 7 men had died, but many more had been wounded. Some of those wounded wouldn't make it past the next hour, some would be ready to fight within minutes. Naruto's gaze traveled to the bodies, draped with white cloth from top to toe to hide them from view. A father sat by the end of one such, a dark expression upon his face while a family wept for another nearby. One of the girls who had been tending to the wounded laid a blanket over one who had been speaking just minutes ago with a shake of her head. 8 dead then. Regret was heavy in his heart, but this was what they had known would happen. They had all made their choices and Naruto found comfort that their amount of dead was much fewer than expected. The samurai had lost many more men than them after all, but Naruto didn't think for a second they had won just yet. Naruto blinked as someone pushed a piece of bread beneath his chin. You should eat. Sho murmured down at him with a worried look. Glancing up at his advisor, Naruto accepted the bread with a muted thanks. Sho seated himself on a box next to Naruto with a groan. Sho's leg had received a beating during the tussle, but he was otherwise fit to fight. How are we looking, Sho? Naruto breathed, eating slowly as he continued to watch his people milling about in worry. We're looking surprisingly good. Sho muttered, speaking low in order to keep the conversation private. Most of the boys are in pretty high spirits after the fight. They think we have a real good fighting chance in all of this, considering how the last engagement went. Sho trailed off as he ate another piece of the bread in his hand. I can say with complete surety that we have at least 120 fighting men left with spears, while most of our archers are still good. Those left on the wall haven't seen any action yet, but they seem fairly motivated considering how the last one went. Ryu only lost 4 men, I think. These numbers are likely incorrect. Naruto murmured. We have more wounded than this. Might be, but hard to tell with our current wounded, seeing as many of them will be ready to fight again. Sho conceded as Naruto glanced across the square. Where's Ryu? With his fiancée. Naruto took a breath at this, Sho giving him a worried look. Should I find him, my lord? No, Naruto muttered. While he would have appreciated Ryu's presence right now, he was well within his rights to be with his fiancée that moment. It's fine. Naruto muttered as he finished eating. This was good. Yeah. Sho chuckled. My sister's always been good at baking. I never asked before, but how old's your sister? Naruto murmured as he leaned back against the pole the boxes were lined up next to. Some small talk would do them good while they waited. She's 14. Sho rubbed his chin in thought. She was 5 when we left the capital. You're from the capital of Earth? Naruto cocked a brow at Sho. While they had worked together for a long while, they hadn't actually spoken much outside of work. Seeing his nod, Naruto was about to ask another question when someone yelled out from the nearby watchtower. Rider! The man yelled out, waving fiercely towards Naruto. Rider to the southeast, towards the quiet vein. Naruto grunted and heaved himself to his feet. He quickly ran towards the ramp of the corresponding wall to see, Sho following as quick as he was able to. Coming to the top of the wall, Naruto saw the rider leave the forest, riding at a slow pace towards the trenches where they had lost many of their own men. About 100 meters away from their camp, he stopped, barely beyond the range of their shortbows. What do they want? Sho murmured after a couple of seconds, the archers on the wall next to them shuffling nervously. To negotiate, I assume. Naruto frowned. It made sense that they intended to negotiate after losing so much more men than them, but it also told Naruto that they had no intentions of giving up just yet. They had more men to spare. Sho. Yes, my lord. You have the wall. Naruto grunted, turning towards the ramp again. Clapping Sho on the shoulder as he passed him, he moved to leave the ramps. I will await your return, my lord. Sho responded without argument. His loyalty was commendable and very much a necessity in their situation. The gate was opened for him as he left, entering the fields of the earlier battle. Blood, guts and corpses still littered the area, but Naruto didn't pay them any mind. They weren't his dead. They had already been dragged back into town to the people that had loved them. Stepping up towards the rider, Naruto wasn't sure what to expect. The rider hadn't been armed, so Naruto had intended the same courtesy, but he could easily kill one rider with his hands alone if the rider tried anything. Coming to a stop before the trenches, the pit filled with the dead was eventually the only thing left between Naruto and the samurai's rider. The rider had a highly intricate and neatly designed armor, trims of gold and red along its edges, silk binding many of the pieces of cloth together. He wore a standard samurai helmet that had some ornaments of dragons which Naruto hadn't seen on any of the others. Naruto assumed the rider in front of him was their leader. He jumped off the horse and paced towards the edge of the pit, glaring at Naruto with hatred in his gaze. The mask covered everything below the bridge of his nose, revealing a disturbingly cold-set gray eyes. Naruto let the silence between them grow for a moment with a stoic and unamused expression. The rider had called him out there so he would be the first to speak. "You're younger than what I expected," the samurai muttered with a cold gaze. He seemed curious, beneath the boiling anger in his eyes. "I suppose I am." Naruto shrugged, his expression unchanging. Even so, he wasn't in the mood for small talk. "Why did you come out here to meet me? Surely not to throw insults?" The rider eyed him for another moment before shaking his head. "You fought well and shamed us in the first battle. We will not underestimate you again," the rider muttered. "Honorless dogs deserving to be put down for your insolence you may be, but I do not wish for further bloodshed if possible. Therefore I am here to bring you the terms of your surrender." Naruto narrowed his eyes at the warrior's words. His insult showed clearly what they thought of him and his people, and it angered him that they cared so little for the reasons of their rebellion. A part of him wanted to ask the warrior for his name, but he didn't want to give him the courtesy. "Let's hear it then," Naruto muttered, nearly scowling at the warrior across the trench. "You and yours will lay down your arms immediately and allow our forces to secure the town. You will have my word that we will not lay a finger on any of your people." Naruto frowned at this. He didn't think for a single second that the daimyo would allow the people to go unpunished. While the army, on their honor, perhaps would not despoil them, whoever got responsibility over the village afterwards wasn't bound to any such promises. "Am I to believe that we are let off, without punishment, just like that?" Naruto snorted condescendingly, clearly showing what he believed the worth of the warrior's words were. "Only the life of whoever leads you are forfeit," the warrior growled. "I understand that the concept of honor is difficult for you, but it is the foundation of our civilization. When we promise something, we keep it." Ah, there it was. Naruto couldn't help but snort in derisiveness. The last noble family was sworn to defend us. Instead, they robbed us, beat us, and did whatever they pleased with us. Naruto shrugged. Honor didn't mean shit to them. "We will bring you an answer before nightfall." If not, Naruto let the sentence trail off, but the meaning was clear and Naruto had said his piece. He turned to return to the town. "What is your name?" the rider called after him, and Naruto's gaze darkened. "I am just a commoner," Naruto yelled back as he left. "Nobody important." His advisors stood gathered around the map in the war room. Naruto had quickly called an emergency meeting as soon as he entered the village again, and they had much to talk about. "So they want your life and expect the rest of us to throw down our arms and let them march in here?" Sho muttered derisively, lips drawn in disgust. "Unacceptable." "I have to agree," Ichiro, the carpenter, muttered as he crossed his arms. "Our people will never accept this." "I know." Naruto sighed. A part of him was almost tempted to take the deal, forfeiting his own life if only for the chance that his people wouldn't suffer. But doing so would mean the sacrifices of those they had lost would be meaningless, as another noble scoundrel would surely take the place where Nobu had left. And I do not believe for a second that the daimyo will accept our people going unpunished after killing the head of a noble house. No matter what promises the general here makes, it is the daimyo's word that is final after all. Silence fell among them as they took in his words. The mood was dim and grave. "So what happens now?" Sho looked to Naruto with the same conviction as always, belief that he would find a way through this for them. The expectations were stifling, but it was a responsibility Naruto had accepted a long time ago. "For now, we have until nightfall to prepare, although I want our guard schedule on the wall to remain unchanged." Sho nodded at this. "Jiro." The man in question looked at Naruto inquisitively. "The people are packed and ready for the worst, yes?" "They are, my lord." Jiro nodded, looking worried. "Are you thinking we may have to?" He let his words trail off meaningfully. The group looked to Naruto with bated breath as he sighed. "I will be honest with you," Naruto began with a frown. "I have no idea how many men they have left, but they have enough to think they can win despite the odds. We got lucky." Naruto held up his hand as the group was about to protest. No matter how you think the first battle went down, we got lucky. They underestimated us and thought they could charge us down like whatever peasants they're usually used to suppressing. It won't happen a second time. Naruto paused, looking them each in the eye as they considered his words. Now, I have no idea what they are going to hit us with next, be it arrows, swords, or hooks to climb the walls. I do know, however, that even if we manage to win this, we aren't going to be able to survive here at length. What do you mean? Jiro frowned, but the rest seemed to wonder the same. This was merely one unit of men, barely more than 100. Naruto began gravely. When the daimyo hears of our victory if we win, what do you think will happen next? Do you think he'll just leave us alone or send an actual army next time? The severity of their situation was beginning to dawn on them now, some looking to the table with hollow grimaces. They were beginning to realize the futility of their efforts. So then, Sho murmured, ever faithful as he looked to Naruto for guidance. The rest did the same, looking to Naruto for direction. What do we do now? Naruto closed his eyes with a sad smile. We need to abandon Kizara Valley. Naruto bound the last strap of his backpack and rose. His back had gotten stiff from packing and the battle earlier during the day hadn't helped either. As he stretched, Naruto sighed and looked about the wide and spacious bedroom that had once belonged to a nobleman. It had been earned through blood, but it had become a home to Naruto, even if he had never expected to experience any greater luxuries than what was provided to him as a commoner, living in a small shack at the outskirts of a small town. And now, he would lose it all. All the comforts he'd grown used to over the last couple of months would be gone forever. Naruto shouldn't complain. Not really. There were families here, like Hiroto's for example, who had lived here for far longer than he. Old families who had worked themselves to the bone to establish a familiar home and hearth, a place where they belonged in the world. They lost far more than Naruto, whose home was little more than a mausoleum. Naruto shook his head, smirking at his own remorse. He was doing it again. That god-awful brooding. Picking up the backpack, he let it rest by the exit as he toured the palace for what would be the last time. The war room had been emptied, the maps safely secured in Naruto's backpack. The decorations, the soft silk curtains and pillows and the many works of arts and weaponry which hung upon the walls however had no place in their journey. It was within these walls that Naruto had become something so much more than what he had ever thought he'd be. He couldn't help but feel sentimental now that he was losing it all. Naruto snorted. He was being overly dramatic. He still had his life and position among his people. That was more than those who had died for them. Casting a last, longing glance across the halls of his home, he wondered when he'd grown so comfortable with the splendor of the palace and its comfortable silks and satin. Refusing to linger any longer, Naruto moved to pick up the backpack. No sense staying around fretting over things that couldn't be changed. The evening sun greeted him as he left the palace, the doors banging shut behind him. Pausing to glance at its position, Naruto frowned with worry. It was nearly time. He jogged from his home, now abandoned, weaving past the many townsfolk all walking towards the same direction as he, backpacks and carts dragged by horses along with them. The mood was grim among the people, their children crying in confusion as their parents did their best to console them. They were too young to understand what was going on, but Naruto doubted they would be shown mercy if the daimyo's men breached the walls. Finally coming to the town square, his people milled about in waiting. It was a large gathering as the entire townsfolk waited. The wounded had been loaded to cart, supplies packed and farm animals herded. All that was left for them to do now was wait. Naruto glanced over the area and found his advisors near the middle, right next to Hiroto and his daughter Hina. Ryo was there as well, doing his best to console her as Hiroto pointedly ignored him. He sighed and quickly jogged over to them. My friends. Naruto nodded in greetings, receiving one in return from everyone present. How are we looking? We're seeing an awful lot of movement in the forest now. Sho frowned. Won't be long now. Naruto nodded at that, keeping his worries at bay as he looked to Jiro. Are people ready to move? If they aren't, they will be when the arrows whistle through the air. Jiro snorted derisively. His frustrations were felt by them all, as people were stubborn and proud to a fault. They could only do so much to hurry them along. Good. Naruto muttered, taking a deep breath as he looked meaningfully at those present. Listen up. The second the fight begins, you will all leave through the northern gate. What if they're there? What if they have already surrounded the settlement in the forest? Ichiro questioned with worry, but Naruto shook his head. They can't. They have too few men, they will be spread far too thin to be useful if they do, and they have no idea where the northern trenches are. Naruto smirked nastily at them. I suspect they don't want to go looking for any more than what they already found of those pits. The group chuckled darkly at that, nodding at his words. No, they will come from the direction they think is now the safest. Sho, did you get the oil spread out into the second line of trenches? Aye. Sho nodded. Oil's poured and grass is strewn about. Good. Naruto nodded, pausing to brace himself for his next words. He knew Sho would protest. I need you to guide our people to the vein. Sho's eyes widened in shock. Before he could protest, Naruto held up his hand and continued. Our people trust you, Sho. And I trust you to get them out of here safely if I fall. My lord! Sho nearly yelled. I can fight. Anyone else here can lead our people to the vein, you know I can dash. You can fight, Sho, that is true. Naruto interrupted him with a strict voice of iron. They didn't have time for this. But you cannot run, not with that limp of yours. Sho grimaced at this, clenching his teeth with frustration. His bravery was commendable, but Sho needed to see the greater picture. Sho. Naruto stepped forward and laid a hand on Sho's shoulder, drawing his attention. I trust you with the responsibility of getting out people to the vein. The thick forest should hide you as long as the daimyo's men aren't guarding the pass. Wait for us there. Looking into his eyes, Sho looked like he still wanted to argue against him, but eventually relented with a somber nod. Naruto nodded back in relief. Making small talk as he relayed some last guiding words for his advisors, a man in the watchtower nearby yelled out. Company! The townsfolk cried out in fear, several beginning to cry now. They were understandably worried. Looking at his advisors meaningfully and giving a last nod to Sho, Naruto looked to Ryu, who stood with his new family. No words were spoken between them as Naruto turned to run for the wall, but they didn't need to. He hoped they would make it out, should the worst come to pass. Naruto only needed to delay them enough for his people to reach the pass. Time was all they needed. People's guard! On me! Naruto roared out across the square, already moving towards the wall. The men and women who were members of the guard quickly said their goodbyes to their weeping families and ran with the rest towards the southeastern gate. Running up to the top of the ramps, above the gate, Naruto narrowed his eyes at the scene before him. The samurai stood lined up along the edge of the forest. They now wore longbows, standing ready with arrows already nocked and waiting. Naruto realized how bad that was. Their bows had much longer range than their own, which were primarily made for hunting and not long-distance warfare like the daimyo's longbows. The rider sat upon his horse, glaring at the town from across the field. For a moment, their eyes locked and there were nothing else around them. The rider had probably long since realized the people of Kizaru would never surrender. Naruto glanced to the mountainside, where the sun had almost dipped below the mountain tops. As if in response to his thoughts, the thin line visible of the sun disappeared behind the ridge. Gaze falling back to the rider, he saw the warrior had been watching to Sun as well. Promise now fulfilled, the rider drew his sword. At his command, men with torches ran out from the forest. Observing them with suspicion, Naruto widened his eyes upon seeing them light their arrows on fire. Fire arrows! Naruto roared to those around him. Shield up! Shields up! The people roared out down the line, ensuring the message came across to those far away from Naruto. Halberd in hand, Naruto crouched beneath his shield, peeking under it from above the top of the wall. The samurai waved his sword and roared a command, pointing his sword towards their village. Like one, the trained archers raised their bows into the air and fired. The fire arrows soared through the night air like fireflies upon the wind, yet the sight wasn't anywhere as soothing. Naruto grit his teeth as the arrows slammed into the wall and shields around him. An arrow with a metal tip suddenly burst through his shield, the dangerous tip right in front of his face. He did his best to ignore the fact that the wall, and whichever buildings the archers hit would likely be set on fire very soon, since most of what they had were built from wood and thatch. Glancing over his shoulder, he could see his people quickly filing out of the northern gate quick as they could. He really hoped the samurai hadn't encircled their settlement. Another arrow connected with his shield as the next volley rained over them, and Naruto was reminded by his grim predicament. Someone screamed nearby, probably hit through either a lack of discipline or just unlucky. Peeking through the gap between his shield and the wall, Naruto saw a unit of samurai, about 60 or so, run straight for their walls. Naruto narrowed his eyes upon the sight. They were armed with hooks and ropes, meaning they would attempt to scale their walls at any moment. Looking over his shoulder, Naruto eyed the 50 archers standing in a box formation at ground level beneath them. Stand ready! Naruto roared at them, pointing his halberd in their direction. They got the message quickly, despite Naruto not having showed to relay his orders and quickly readied themselves. Looking back towards the field, he saw the men near the trenches where their first riders had met their untimely ends. Naruto quickly gazed towards the nearby watchtower. Yoshiro. An old man peeked out of the watchtower with a stoic expression. Receiving a nod from Naruto, he rose slowly and pulled out an arrow. Yoshiro was a hunter and had been so all his life. He was a nobody, but still well respected for his skill with bow and arrow despite his old age. Naruto watched as Yoshiro lit the arrow on fire and took aim. An arrow splintered partially through his shield, but Naruto's eyes remained unflinching. He noted with an odd sense of detachment that several houses in the village had begun to burn behind him and smoke were rising from the bottom of the wall in front of him. They didn't have much more time now. Finally satisfied with his aim, Yoshiro let his burning arrow fly across the field. It hit a seemingly unremarkable spot in the middle of the charging samurai. But that was where another trench, smaller than the other one, had been dug and filled with grass soaked in oil. The oil lit up from the fire, the heat quickly spreading across the grass like wildfire. The samurai who had been unlucky to stand upon the grass were almost immediately cloaked in flame, boiled alive within their armors. The burning trench separated the field in two, half of the charging samurai stuck behind the flames. Smoke made it difficult for their longbow men to see and they quickly stopped firing in fear of shooting their own. The men on the town side of the fire however quickly got their act together and continued the charge towards the town. Naruto quickly seized the moment and stood upon the wall. "Ready, archers!" Naruto roared, giving the men only a second to prepare. The men on the wall scrambled to get their bows up, but those on ground level were already ready. "Knock!" Naruto roared after a moment, and the men obeyed. "Draw loose!" Their arrows whipped over Naruto's head as the men on the ground level shot above them. He was a bit nervous that the men and women who only 2 months ago barely knew how to stand in formation were firing so close to his position, but there was little he could do about it now. The volley missed most of the targets as the samurai were spread out, and the few which hit didn't do much damage. Naruto saw one fall to an arrow, but rose again quickly. Ordering another volley, the first wave of enemies arrived at their wall, quickly throwing their hooks over the top of their wall to begin their climb. "Fire at will!" Naruto roared at the men on ground level, before readying himself with his halberd. "Those on the wall, draw hatchets!" "OSU!" The men roared in confirmation. Some of them shot their last arrows down in an attempt to get some of the samurai at a ground level, before drawing their hatchets. They set to work immediately on cutting the ropes of the hooks. A samurai was about to climb to the top on the wall next to Naruto, but with a closed and chakra-enhanced fist to his face, Naruto sent the man flying with a broken face to the ground again. The fall probably didn't kill him, but he wouldn't be getting back up again. While they succeeded in cutting some of the ropes, the second a few samurai managed to scale the walls, they were quickly distracted from stopping the rest climbing up after the first. The townsfolk had fought well in a shield wall, but upon the wall like they were now, the samurai showed their superior prowess as warriors with utter superiority. Naruto ran towards a samurai a couple of meters away on the wall, running him down with the tip of his halberd. He quickly kicked the man off after fatally wounding him, slamming the axe of his weapon into another samurai's side who was about to climb over the wall. As another charged him, Naruto quickly blocked with his shield and bashed the warrior down from the wall in one swift movement. Looking around, Naruto watched with a grimace as the samurai were completely demolishing his men at the ramps. A war cry from the field pulled his attention as more of the enemy came running to climb the wall. Defeat was imminent if they stayed. "Retreat!" Naruto roared, striking down another samurai with his halberd, cleaving the man down the shoulder. "Retreat for the northern gate!" His people quickly picked up whatever they could, be it their own weapons or wounded comrades, and booked it. The samurai gave chase, cutting down some in their attempts to make it down the wall. Rage flowing through his veins, Naruto fought with wild abandon as his people ran past him on their way out while he held the chasing samurai at bay. Eventually, all of his people who hadn't been captured or struck down had escaped, and as he saw the enemy samurai move to open the southern gates, Naruto ran as fast as he could. Kizaru was left burning in his wake. They quickly made their way throughout the forest, and Naruto hoped to whatever gods that were listening that the enemy wouldn't wizen up and return for the vein. Hopefully, due to their escape through the northern gate, they thought they had escaped deeper into the valley instead of sneaking around them. His men cried silently as they hobbled silently through the dark woods. Those who were wounded